And we're officially live. Hey there, everyone. The name's Adam, and we're actually doing more Chronicles of Darkness, in particular Dark Eras. We're a little bit late because we were making a bingo for the current events going on in the nightmare world over across the sea.
My money is currently on T-14 Armada taken out by Ukrainian AT gun.
My
I
bet
can see it
is
happening.
my bet is accidental Kazakhstan border skirmish.
But we both also agreed that possibly the most likely event is friendly fire.
Friendly fire, yeah, that's
Friendly
kind of
fire
a
or Russia accidentally invading Belarus.
either or. It's gonna be either or. It's pretty bad. Speaking of pretty bad, we're covering a pretty interesting culture today in the Chronicles of Darkness. Also, a very interesting book called Skinwalkers, which never got an update out of the first edition, mainly because it got replaced by War Against the Pure.
Sort of not. Skinchangers was a blue book splat on its own. War Against the Pure focused more on like the shifter mechanics, not just you have a different form you can change into.
True, but they
There's a
did stat out different creatures in that, and that's kind of the strength of that book, I think.
yeah. This is more of a case of this is an area of the world that most people are kind of generically familiar with, simply because it's such a weird, wacky time period, and it's exotic without being, I don't know, too distant. Because it's not too hard to go on a tour of some of these places, right?
I mean, you
There's
can
modern
honestly just
cities.
go to Mexico, and some of them were built on top of it.
Yeah, like Mexico City is built on top of the old Aztec capital.
Tenochtitlan.
You can still look at the various waterways in Mexico City. Those are basically untouched from, like, they're basically in the same location that they were back then.
And that is the thing. We are actually in the setting of Triple Mexica Alliance because they weren't actually called the Aztec Empire. They were the Triple Alliance of the three great cities.
Yeah, they do use Aztec because it's simply what we know.
It's simpler. It's also simpler because let's be
Yeah,
honest. Besides Tenochtitlan, you don't know the other two cities. To give you an
the other
idea,
two
I forgot
cities,
the other names already too.
the other two cities don't exactly do much. Let's be fair.
So
Part of it
yeah,
was Tenochtitlan basically dominated the other two cities into submission through intermarriage and political strength.
well the other thing is Tenochtitlan was always kind of it was built on a previous city, or I think it got the name from a previous city. It's always been the most important city, though, in Mesoamerican culture because it is kind of that place where it's one of the few areas that you can actually have a large scale civilization, at least in
Yeah,
Mexico, because Mexico is very much a mountainous jungle-like or desert-like, depending on where you are.
yeah, like out towards the Yucatan Peninsula, it's more jungle, more lowlands.
I mean, there are
Uh,
actual forests,
ho-
like the lowlands on the coasts are pretty habitable too in some areas. It's just the Sierra Madre makes it a very dry place once the further north you get. Sierra Madre is what it refers to the southern half of the Rockies, for those wondering. It stretches all the way down.
yeah,
So anyway, beneath the
the
skin. Oh, go on.
eh, yeah, but yeah, you're breaking up a little bit for me.
Oh, I am.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's no one in chat, so I can't quite confirm. Is it that bad?
only occasionally. It's not too bad. So anyway, right beneath the skin details the Aztecs at the height of their power. During the reign of King Azhutzotl or something like that.
That's what he's
Yeah, what he said.
I'm not pronouncing it right either. Don't worry. I know
But
that
the
I know that X's are like pronounced kind of like J's, like or J, like J or something like that, and that's about it.
yeah. So the fact of the matter is that a lot of this is it's a time and place where things are kind of in motion and shifting around. As the Aztecs are still a very new empire, they are still a very new culture in many ways in terms of the syncretism between like the Northern Highlands and the Mexico Valley people. The various places of the Valley of Mexico also are not all under Aztec control yet.
Yeah,
There's a lot of them that are paying tribute. There's a
there's
lot of them that are controlled by Aztec military force, basically.
yeah, there's cases like Tlaxcala, that's another noted kingdom. There's also I think it's the Tabasco culture. They're one of the few metalsmithing cultures that were native to Mesoamerica. They recently discovered copper a couple hundred years prior to this.
Yeah, they're just working it out right now because there's
Mostly
obsidian
in beating
everywhere.
it. Yeah, there's a lot of important cities. And then further
Yeah,
south, you have declined Maya. Like, yeah, the classical
yeah.
period, they've collapsed a lot, but they're still there.
They're there. They're just not in huge cities anymore.
There's also the weirdness of there's another Mayan branch off called the Huastec, which are further north.
Yeah, there's some
The
weird.
Chichimanga culture, I think they were called.
Yeah, there's some weird shit going on in Mesoamerica at this time. There's a lot of migration happening to some degree, like
Because this
in
was during the medieval warm period, which sounds nice for Europe, and it was nicer because it warmed up noticeably. But in a lot of the world, they either experienced droughts or more rain. For
yeah,
example, in the Southwest, there was I believe, 30 to 50-year mega drought, which means that
yeah,
for decades, rain did not fall in areas even that had little rainwater. And it's from that the Aztec came from. They came from the Southwest, and effectively, that changing climate made it untenable for them.
yeah. It's also notable that what they say is that the year is 1486. So this is a bit after that period.
It is after that period, but again, the Aztecs are super new. Like, to give you an idea, I think only the Inca are newer at this point.
The other really interesting bit about this is that the Aztecs themselves, as we'll discuss, were not actually native to the area.
Oh, they weren't. The Nahuatl people came further north.
The Huadal culture was sort of, but the Aztec people specifically were not native to the Mexican Valley.
I believe,
Uh,
based on archaeological discussions, it was around the Arizona, kind of like West Texas area.
yes, they were farther north and then they migrated down. So here's things to note. One of the big themes is identity. It's both very strict and very fluid. Parentage determines whether one is noble Kramen, what your trade should be, but also what your name and your birth date determine a lot of things.
Because the Aztecs put a lot into divination. A lot of cultures did. Aztecs were not alone in this.
However, everyone is also a warrior. If you're called up to service, you are called up to service. The Aztecs actually had a very functional conscription system,
But
which
yeah, it was you're not serving us, you get sacrificed.
more like that they'd have like a group of people that would go out and be like, okay, so this group of people, if you're around this area, you're getting conscripted now. And they'd then supply them with weapons and then they'd move them on. It's a very interesting system.
It it's similar to the Inca had something like that called the Mitka system, but the
Yeah.
difference is Mitka also covered corvée labor and actually colonial efforts. Basically, they would scout out and found new towns. It was also a way to control populations because they could move native Quechua speakers over there, and they could also move native people that spoke there, like what was it, the Keto culture. You can force them to go back to the homeland,
Yeah.
essentially dilute the rebellious chances.
It's also important to note that gods in this era are pretty fluid. The Aztecs changed the local Nahuatl pantheon quite a bit.
Well, partially, but a lot of it was already natively there. To give you an idea, sacrifices were a part of Mesoamerican cultures, but the Aztecs were the ones to step them up notably. And they
Yeah.
also emphasized their crueler aspects because there
They
were.
also they also emphasized a completely new deity, basically. Or more accurately, they took one that was very minor and then they focused everything around them.
It was Quetzalcoatl, right?
No, it was Huitzilopochtli,
Oh,
the sun god.
Huitzilopochtli, the sun
Yeah.
slash war god.
Also represented by fucking hummingbirds.
Yeah,
I want to
for
note this.
for those of you who have seen our glorious stream on, not stream, our glorious recording on changing breeds, yeah, that's kind of a nod to that. The hummingbird shifters are essentially Aztec revivalists.
Yeah.
So the mood is high strangeness. And this is because the Aztec believe that the world will end if priests don't sacrifice humans to maintain the sun. Because in Aztec mythology, they see themselves as the fifth race, hence the title of the stream.
Yeah, there's been 4
Four
suns before
previous
this.
strains of, four previous sons and four previous races of man, and
Yeah.
each of them have died in different ways.
One of them got all turned into monkeys and then eaten by jaguars,
That's one of
which
them.
is my personal favorite one.
One of them were just completely destroyed utterly because they disrespected the
One
gods.
were drowned in a rain of blood, and one was blown off the planet.
Yeah, by the Earth monster, because they also believe that the Earth is a sleeping monster.
No, the Earth monster didn't eat any of them yet. I think it was Quetzalcoatl who got really pissed at them and then blew them all away because they were flipping him off.
And that's the thing. Either the sun will burn out. They believe either the sun will burn out and they'll all die in darkness, or they'll be eaten alive by the sleeping
Or
Earth.
more accurately, the moon will eat the sun and therefore wake up the Earth. And
that's not good.
Yeah, because the sun killed the Earth Mother so that it could. Yeah, it's complicated. That's also a much newer myth, and that's part of the Aztec revival. Well, not revival, more like Aztec reformation of the religion to be used kind of in their.
They had to justify why they had to sacrifice so many people.
They also had to justify why they were in charge,
and
they
why
basically
they could remove you.
Yeah, and how they did it was they basically took a deity that was more minor compared to. Again, everybody knew Quetzalcoatl. Everybody. He was one of the oldest deities of the region.
I think he was around since the Olmec. Like, that's where first depictions of him came from.
He's so fucking old that, like, the oldest written records of him, like, have just mentions of, and then he was born. And they just don't mention anything further. It's just like, yeah, you already know him. They don't describe him much more than just like, hey, yeah, he's here. That's how old he is.
But his worship is more consistent, for those wondering, than even the primordial Greek pantheon, because it's thought, based on archaeological records, that the Titans that in Greek myth that were overthrown by the Olympians, they were the original Greek pantheon.
They were like the Proto-Indo-Europeans, possibly.
And yeah, Quetzalcoatl is as old, if not older, and more continuously worshipped than them.
Yeah, he's been around basically since there were large cities in Mesoamerica. We know very little about him from this era, and there's so many different aspects and ways that he was worshipped. Like the Mayans didn't really view him as a god as much as a monster, and then split off another aspect of him into a completely different thing. And then depending on Mayan cities, you might have completely different worship of him there, as either like a wind god or like the mount of the sun god who likes to bring doom to humanity or something like that. Like it's complicated.
But yeah, the mood is high strangeness because the Aztecs believe, and honestly, they used it as an excuse to get rid of people they don't like, usually troublemakers and or lesser states, that they need to sacrifice humans to maintain the sun, and their priests stalk the earth, stalk the streets in the shape of owls or jaguars.
Well,
Also, hello.
Apologies. First off, are we live?
Yes.
Apologies for the lateness. Let's just say dinner disagreed. With my plans.
Sorry. For those more, sorry about that, Craig. I actually thought you were someone else initially.
No, it is I, Greg, the unfortunate sufferer of food allergies.
Yeah, sorry about that, chat. It's just I couldn't recognize your voice initially, and you reminded me for a half second of there's another semi-regular that sometimes crashes into chats like this. So.
Oh yeah. Sorry, boss. Sorry about that, but no, it is just me.
But yeah, you're not too late. We just got into high strangeness. Like we just started because we went into a big tangent about the Aztec mythology and how they controlled things.
But yeah, so
yeah, basically the priests are skin changers,
A lot of them, yeah. There's remnants from the previous ages, as they see it, still littering the landscape.
Yeah, and
And
that could be a mage. That could be a mage nod off. That could be anything.
it could be it could also be a reference to infrastructure, which
Yeah,
is
it could
how
be,
they
which
take
is the
best from this
Unchained.
book. Yes. So they go immediately into that demons are dealing with a very different environment than where they would almost anywhere else on Earth at this point. Mesoamerica is a culture completely devoid of like full-on writing. You know?
The best they have are pictoglyphs at this stage.
Yeah. There is writing, but like this is not a world where your average person is illiterate or
On
even remotely
top of
close to
that-
literate.
On top of that, not even the wheel has been invented yet here.
Well, no, they have the wheel. They just don't use it. They just never
Yeah.
found a. They're
They
just sort
never
of like
found value in the wheel.
they didn't have any like big animals to pull it, so it's like
Well, they did,
why
but they
bother?
ate them all.
Like I seriously doubt it's sort of like with like
No,
like
there were
zebras
horses.
or water buffalo
There
or
were
whatever.
horses in the New World, and they were pretty much the same as horses in the Old. It's just the last of them were killed off during the glass glaciation, and humans drank the
Yeah.
last of them. Because that's the thing, horse blood was a very common treat to the natives.
Yeah, we kind of ate all of them. So the main thing though is like it's sort of similar to expecting like someone to domesticate a Cape buffalo. It's not. There's not a lot of large livestock. It's like the opposite problem of sub-Saharan Africa, where everything hates you.
The best they
It's-
had are the llama.
The llama, which is down in South
Oh,
America.
am I a bit quiet? Do I sound better now?
I thought you sounded fine.
You sound fine to us, but you might not sound
Sorry,
fine.
Holtz. I heard there were some issues, but like I can't quite fix on the fly. The best I can do is maybe improve my microphone volume a bit. Is that better? That's about as loud as I can get it on the mic. Sorry.
But yeah, so they also mention that there is a lot of small individual tribal settlements and villages and all these all over the Mexican Valley. This is very true. There are a lot of little city-states all over central Mexico at this point.
And that's
Most of
mainly
them are-
because the geography.
Yes, it's a lot like ancient Greece, where there's so many fucking mountains. It's like, yeah, you have all these like city-states develop.
Yep.
And
It's
same
rich
thing
with
happened here.
variation. Oh, yeah, Greg. Apparently you're quiet too. I don't hear it in the stream, so
I'm quiet because I wasn't talking.
Oh yeah, that's true. So the other bit is
immigrations. Because let's be honest, in Mesoamerica, there's only so many good spots to farm.
yeah, it's not only that it's difficult to find a good farming area, it's also that it's hard to keep it. Because much like Greece, much like Mesopotamia, much like all these other places where you get early civilization, there's a lot of fighting over what land is good. And
On top of that, unlike Greece, the North has a lot of nomadic cultures that can sweep down. Because, yes, the Sierra Madres are pretty harsh to cross sometimes, but they're not impossible, and they're a lot harder to defend because of the sheer amount of passes that are there.
It's not a narrow peninsula. It's not a narrowing area on that. There's not also like a big, huge river very close by that provides other protection, like the Danube or some of the other, like the Southern Balkans is kind of shielded to a degree from the rest of Europe.
Which is why every now and again you have random natives coming down, like the Aztec.
Yeah, like the Aztecs, who they somewhat speak a similar language and they have a somewhat similar culture to the people down south, but they're just distinct enough that the local heads basically told them that, yeah, you're living in a swamp. Go fuck yourselves.
Yeah, because they were not only were they barbarians, they were blood crazy barbarians. Because remember, they came from a mega drought, which required them to be a lot harsher than other tribes to survive.
It's also that they were
and they had their own weird blood rights already.
Yeah, they already had their own weird different religion, which is part of why they got shoved to the side. One of the things that they did to declare war the first time that the Aztecs declare war is that they ask for
the hand in marriage of a priest king, his daughter.
Yeah. And they take her
in
and
her
they don't
alive.
They then skin her, put her skin on a thing, and say, yes, now she's the bride of the war god, Huitzilopochtli.
Oh no, it's even more screwed up than that. The priest was wearing her frickin' skin.
Oh, right! That was it!
The priest was wearing her frickin' skin.
Yeah. So,
And the priest king that married her off first was like, "Oh, she's still here. Good." Oh.
Yeah, like, oh, fuck. You sons of bitches.
But yeah, for those of you who just joined in, the theme is identity because in Mesoamerica things were changing a lot because the Aztecs changed a lot. And
Yes.
there's a lot of things that are destined from birth or your call sign. Like in the Elder Scrolls, your birth sign determined a lot about you in society.
Are you born under the sign of the Ushrinak or the sign of the Tower?
There's also another name for it, caste system.
That's there too. If you are born to noble, you are noble. If you are a peasant, you are born peasant. There is some fluidity though, and
there is a lot of fluidity in terms of the warrior aristocracy. That is still very fluid at this point.
you can murder your way up to the top if you're good enough.
Yes.
Or I guess since they're were creatures, maul and then possibly eat.
Yep, and that's the other thing, high strangeness. So, again, remember, the Aztecs believed they had the power of the sun through blood and hearts.
Blood, preferably from a heart. Blood spilling was also acceptable.
And on top of that, in the world of in the Chronicles of Darkness, yeah, they're sorcerer priests, they're jaguar priests, they're owl priests, they're jaguar, they're whatever priests. They are skin changers.
Some of them are skin changers. Some of them have figured out how to shapeshift.
And some of them are just straight up mages.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there are old civilizations. Remember, besides them, there was Tenochtitlan is old.
The Toltec,
Toltec, Olmecs.
There's a lot of other cultures in this area that had gone, that had their time in the sun and gone,
or still around.
Yeah, like the Mayans. So this means
there's a
that
lot
you
of
have
missing stuff, and some of it are fragments from older society, normal older society. Some are weirder
might be
things.
Fragments of God machine projects,
or
some
perhaps
might be
old mage cities.
Yeah.
But in this one, we're talking about broken infrastructure, because under the Aztecs, Tenochtitlan wasn't the most important. The biggest city in the New World at its peak was under the Toltecs, which at some point had something as much as 10% of the New World's population in it.
Yeah, there were various mega cities in the Americas. The most recent one before Tenochtitlan really took off was Cahokia up in the north, which was rivaling London and Paris for a while in terms of population. That kind of collapsed at the end of the medieval warm period.
Because the climate shift really did a lot of damage in America.
Yeah, possibly also a major disease outbreak, and then people just sort of moved away from the site, and
that may have been where syphilis came from, actually, because the only New World disease is syphilis.
And even then, we're not sure, because syphilis is a weird disease.
So anyway,
there's some evidence of it maybe being in Europe before the New World. It's just we don't know.
This is a good place for monsters, because if you accidentally get caught in a city-state, you just move to the next one. It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
even in the Aztec Empire, it's not an empire. It's a confederation of 3 powerful Aztec cities. You can just bounce from city to city.
Yeah, well, Nahuatl cities, really.
And on top of that, if that's an issue, you can just hide in the wilds, because outside of the developed areas, yeah.
Like, yes, it's a civilized valley, but it's like there's still a lot of empty space out there, and you can go off on your own and live, well, not comfortably, but you can definitely go off on your own and not be completely fucked.
And if you don't want to be sacrificed in the blood pit, this is a good way to do it.
Yeah. Now they break down this chapter into 5 sections, which is what has come before, where we are, what is to come, the supernatural, and then playing the game.
So we'll just go briefly through each of these.
What's an interesting thing to note is that the Aztecs had a public school system,
which is unique even among New World cultures. I think they're the only ones that seriously had that.
Yeah, this was mostly to provide essentially religious indoctrination.
Wasn't syphilis only found in llamas also? Yeah, possibly.
It's possible. Like, again, diseases can be weird like that. The main thing to remember is that the Aztecs themselves have their own creation myth, which has changed somewhat over the years to focus more on the god they like the most. It's kind of one of those things. So so they go about talking where there's like this dual hermaphroditic god that fathered and mothered the four directions, which are the Texlipocas, including Texlipoca, Quetzalcoatl, I think Tylok, the rain god,
Tlaloc and Huichilpotli.
Huitzilopochtli, and Ziplatotlak, I think the flayed god, basically. I'm just gonna call him the flayed god. And these are the four really big kahuna deities of the time.
I mean, two of them alone created the world and then destroyed it.
Yeah, the Texlipoca and Quetzalcoatl do not get along. As mentioned, the first son is Texlipoca, basically like Texlipoca called down jaguars to eat people. Then Quetzalcoatl blew away all the people because Texlipoca taught them how to swear at him, basically.
Well, the best part is the brothers argue over who becomes the son each time.
Yes.
So the first race of men are the Jaguar son. They're a race of giants. Quetzalcoatl manages to take the son title. His brother responded by screaming and making jaguars eat him.
Because more accurately, Texlipoca decided that being the son is a bitch, and I don't like it, and just left. And then when Quetzalcoatl tried to take over, he just called down jaguars to kill everybody because he was just sick of it.
Now, here's the thing, though. This is an actual thing, and they even say if you want to include these race of giants from the first age, the first race of man, they're dangerous as hell, but terrified of jaguars because of this.
Yes.
There's not many left. There's
that.
only a few. There's like a handful left.
Yeah. They then go to the next group, which is, Texlipoca gets into a fight.
Yep, but the second era people are like us.
Turns them into monkeys. And then Quetzalcoatl blows them off the face of the earth because fucking Texlipoca, basically. God damn it.
Well, yeah, he got so angry. Like, how dare you turn mine into monkeys, damn it.
So he turns them all. So he just blows them off the face of the earth and just says, okay, fuck it, I'm done. I'm tapping out. Next god is Tylok.
But no. But here's the thing. The second race are still around, and if you include them, they're all Skinchangers, but they're monkeys that wish to regain their humanity. So they'll skin a person and wear them.
Yeah, the next one is Tylok, who gets really mad because guess who cucks him?
Well, no, it gets more pathetic, actually. Tlaloc becomes the third son, but then, because he's the son, he decides to be an asshole and refuse to grant people any fucking water.
The reason for that, though, is because his wife was cucked away from him by Texlipoca because he wasn't paying her any attention as the son. So all the people start praying, and he's like, oh, you want... No, I'm not giving you rain, you little grateful shits. I'm depressed. And then when they finally rebel against the god,
his response is,
you're not giving us rain.
Oh, you want rain? Here you go. Here you go. Rain of fire.
A rain of fire. The next...
By the way, the hummingbird shifters from Changing Breeds, aka the only good part of the book, the bird shifters in general, these ones come from this era.
Yeah. So next up is the water sun.
Which
I'm not even going to try to pronounce that.
I guess.
It's Tylok's sister, and she's apparently really nice.
Yep, River Lake Goddess.
The reason why she destroys the world is because Texlipoca, again, basically calls and says, do you really believe that they like you? They're just worshipping you because they're nice to them. They don't actually like you. And so she gets depressed and cries and drowns the world.
And her sadness. And that's where the fish came from.
Uh-huh.
By the way, yes, the Aztec that's why the Aztec do not eat a lot of fish, because they see them as men, and it's like a weird form of cat. Actually, no, they're not bothered by that. You want to know what the original chili was?
Chili con carne with people.
So, yeah, when Cartman from South Park made Scott Tenorman chili, Scott Tenorman's parents' chili, he was just making an old Aztec recipe.
Yeah.
The original
so then-
chili.
If he realized he was doing anything a Mexican did, he'd vomit in disgust.
Probably.
Yeah. Now,
Although
the
the other version is with dogs, because xolotls, which are the hairless dogs, that
Those
was also
are,
a very common one.
they're also part of the thing of like they're one of the contrast deities to Quetzalcoatl is like this fucking death dog. Kind of weird, but there you go. So then there's a lot of stuff about the fifth son. There's a few different
Which is where we're
stories.
We're at the fifth son.
And basically, yeah, we're the new sun, and for the sun to keep going, we need blood. Yay!
Yeah, well, what happened was the same asshole brother is super angry that he didn't become the sun, so he chose to become the moon.
No, that's a different one.
Oh.
Yeah, it's complicated. TOC and whatnot. But the point, though, is that the gods die and are reborn as well as humanity. So, except for like a few of them, like Quetzalcoatl, and I kind of love this. This is their explanation for why people have different shapes. Is that so? In the fourth age, when all the humans get drowned and all
Drowned or become fish.
Well, all their bones end up in the underworld, obviously.
All four races.
Yeah, all of
the world is bones.
So Quetzalcoatl goes down to get the bones and tries to bring them out, and he trips and he breaks them. And then he's like, ah, shit.
Not only that, but there's also, he has to deal with Mictlan, the Lord of the Dead.
Yeah, he basically just takes him from him. He's just, the other guys just like, oh yeah, you're Quetzalcoatl, yeah, you can have the bones. Because, that's Quetzalcoatl for you.
Well, no, the Lord of the Dead actually, in this own story work, he's like, no, you're Quetzalcoatl. That's the only reason I haven't trapped you here forever. But you got to do these challenges, buddy. And if you pull it off, I'll let you have the bones.
Yeah. Again, tellings differ on this bit. This part, there's, again, you can tell kind of what the official Aztec line is and then the general Nahuatl culture is, because there's some that are very concrete about details, and there's some that really aren't. And the ones that are very concrete about details are usually the official Aztec lines.
Like here, where you grind the bones in the meal after breaking them, and then they then bled on the ground bone meal, and thus the first people were born. It's kind of like almost a very screwed up version of human creation myth in Semitic culture, where we're created from clay.
Yeah, it's basically is clay. It's like, okay, so the bones of what came before, clay, earth, rock, mixed with something divine, which is in this case blood.
Whereas the Semitics believed it was breath.
It was breath or semen, depending on your divinity of choice.
Why does that sound like the end of the Epic of Gilgamesh? Because humans are uncreative monkey people.
Every it's the same reason. There's always a giant sky god and mud.
Well, no, it does kind of depend a bit, but the reason there's so many sky gods, at least in the old world, is
because
the
there's a fucking
Indo-Europeans.
sky. It's also because there's a giant fucking sky up there. Holy shit.
And the sky gives you things like water, and people learned very early on, if sky water don't fall, everything die.
Yeah.
I know, but I was like, why is it always the sky father? Why is it like a bunch of other
there
things?
There are
like,
some sky mothers, but usually it's a sky father. Like, for example, the Egyptians had a sky mother, and the earth was the father.
Yeah, but the Egyptians were horribly fascinated with death above all things else.
Well, yeah.
And what's below, not what comes from above. Besides, they didn't actually really care that much about what came above. They had the Nile.
Yeah.
That's why they were so different.
Yeah, so the other bit is to note that there wasn't any food, so Quetzalcoatl became an ant and then gave us grain. Isn't he a great dude?
Yep, but he also had to free the grain from the mountain.
Yeah. Then they talk a little bit about what their creation story is, which is that there were 7 tribes.
There's also the before Chico Mostok.
Yeah, they basically those people aren't really people.
They're not human.
Kind of the Aztec justification for a lot of this is that they're not really people.
The people sacrifice we sacrifice aren't humans.
Yeah. But yeah, like then there's like, if they're not Nahuatl, they're
and they also describe that Aztlan, the concept of the ideal land that the Aztecs have.
Yeah.
That might be a mage myth.
Might be a mage myth.
Or it could
You
be
can do
just
that.
the god machine's attempt at making infrastructure in the New World that horribly failed.
Yeah, so they also then talk about like the Seven Shapes of Schismatech, where the Azteca are the Mexica are the last tribe to leave, and then these are the ones that become the Aztecs, so on and so forth, and we're very special and all that. So
Yeah, because they stood by the island the longest.
So they then talk about how they spent 200 years wandering in the wilds under the god Huitzilopochtli, who, as I mentioned, is also the sun god, depending on some interpretations. It kind of depends.
Yeah,
He's
basically,
definitely a war
he
deity,
looks at
though.
them and he's like, they need rest. So let's find a place where he can rest.
A very specific place where it has to be in the middle of a lagoon. It has to be on top of a cactus where an eagle is eating a snake. This is very specific part of the prophecy. So they by some miracle find it on this lagoon that was given to them by these other people.
Oh no, you're talking about the later one. The first time they found a lagoon, and they asked Huitzilopochtli, "Hey, is this where we can we just hang out here? This lagoon's pretty good." And he's like, "No, it doesn't. Like, no, there's a specific lagoon I'm leading you to."
Yeah, it's a very specific and esoteric place we're taking you to. Like you'll know it when you see it, buddy.
And well, what happened is the people are like, "Wait, what?" So they ask him again, "Can we leave people behind?" And he's like, "No. Well, the ones that went to stayed at the lagoon, the rest of them just left them behind.
Yeah, they're just
with
like
nothing.
Yeah, this became one of their later. This is their explanation for one
the
of their rival
Tarascans.
tribes. Yeah. There's a few other kind of like, oh, that's kind of neat bits.
I like this because I'm not familiar with this stuff as much.
Yeah, their explanations of what they see how they see the world it's quite funny, honestly.
Yeah, Huitzilopochtli's sister showed up for a while, and
because also sometimes known as the moon, which because her decapitated head is the moon, according to some legends.
Well, anyway, her showing up made people confused because they're like, "Brrr!" And some of them chose to follow her instead, and Huitzilopochtli,
they don't like it, and also they're the ones that founded the city we don't like. It's very simple, right?
Also, they think that scorpions and spiders are spies of the moon.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you think that the Aztecs were led by a congenital race of schizophrenics, it kind of makes more sense when you think about it.
It sort of does, but I'll get into this later. I'll talk about, especially once we get into like the agriculture of the area, why things are so weird and bloody and wild. A lot of it's because of maize, and I'll explain why when we get there.
So yeah, what happens is they eventually decapitate the moon.
Yeah, he decapitates the moon goddess, then borrows the flesh of either a priest or incarnates himself, somewhat talking. They also, of course, make the first dams and all this other stuff. And
they continue going on. They keep moving until eventually they finally find that damn lake that they were supposed to get to.
After 200 years, like, the Exodius doesn't have fucking shit on this. Like, oh, you wandered in the desert for 40 years. Yeah, we had to, like, fight everyone
also, remember,
along the way.
They had to wander. They weren't just wandering. They were wandering from one specific spot.
Yeah, they were wandering. They were going. This is like Homeworld, basically. Like, this is the plot to Homeworld.
Oh yeah, one of the important cities was Texcoco. Now I remember.
Yes.
By the way, it's not always Skyfathers. Holtz has commented that the Minoans barely cared for the sky. They actually venerated Poseidon primarily.
Well, yeah, that's happened with
the chief god.
The difference was Poseidon was also an earth deity.
He was also an earth deity, and more importantly, he was a chthonic deity. As in, he had control over life and death, which the Mycenaeans and Minoans very much had a fascination with.
Plus, they were an island.
Yeah, the Minoans also had a thing for bulls. We're not quite sure whether that was as a representation of the might of Poseidon or the might of the ocean, or it was just like
maybe it's just a symbol of the monarchy. Who knows? Maybe it's just a symbol of the monarchy. Who knows?
Yeah. Or the matriarchy. Who fucking knows? Like the Minoans are very hard to pin down on what their governmental structure actually was like, but we're pretty sure that there was a very important place given to females because of the fact that the men were often off sailing. So, Who's in charge? You know.
The Mexica also discovered the ancient Toltec ruins at this point.
Yep. And they go, giants. Has to be giants.
What else could it be?
So here's a little bit of if you want to use this in depictions of the Toltec, it's completely unknown why they fell apart. But there is in one of the ruins, there's a mural of giant serpents eating humans.
Yeah. Again, I love Mesoamerican mythology because it's just like, so what if we take like your normal ass stories and make them the most batshit insane bloody things possible? And again, we'll get to part of why that is in a bit, but they then mentioned the bit about
the sacrificing the daughter. So it's even more fucked up because what happens is the Mexica finally find a pretty good land where the Toltec were. They settle there for a good while, and they actually do really well there.
Yeah, and it's literally like, oh.
But then Chipotle is like, no, this isn't the place. You know what you must do, and so the priest skins a daughter alive and fucking wears her.
Yeah, she has to be the bride of war. Which, yeah, then they find the final sign, which is the heart of the fucking king they killed, held by an eagle, consumed by a snake. Yeah, like again, metal as hell.
When in reality, it was probably just a cactus, and the snake is just on top of a fucking flower.
Yeah, like it's all metaphysical bullshit, man. Like, we're not gonna go too deep into it.
What probably actually happened was the Aztec, because they're a race of psychopaths that came from the north with their weird blood cult, offended their ally by doing something really fucking stupid like this for a ritual.
Yep. Because, to them, this is a great honor. Like, this is, you're literally becoming the bride of war. It's great.
It's probably a legit ritual they had that I don't know if they still had when they formed their empire, but they had during this time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And but all the the people.
But everyone saw it as
you just killed the princess. You just killed the princess.
Yeah, you recreated Buffalo Bill. You're Buffalo Bill. You're a degenerate. We're kicking you out.
Right.
So yeah, they formed Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan, which
is one of the three. It's Teotihuacan, the Tenochtitlan, and then... Well, no.
There's like three.
Teotihuacan, Texcoco, and Tenochtitlan. Those were the three. Now I remember. Yes. I just had to see them, and I knew.
Yes. So they talk about the Valley of all this. So they go and talk about all of these areas where there's these cave systems underneath as well, and they then say the God Machine might have nudged them in this direction because this is where they could put infrastructure.
Well, yeah, Chipotle was probably the God Machine, a God Machine angel.
Possibly.
At least in this setting, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And almost all of them claim...
Also, that would make a lot of sense if a lot of their beginners were stigmatics.
Yes, so they go, and they also mention that the Toltecs... All of the Aztecs try to claim that they're have some descent from the Toltecs in some way.
I'm just reminded of another reason why the Mayans were collapsing, because they came in right when a massive change in culture happened, because there was I believe there was a fertility failure briefly during this time.
There was a
mixture of drought and blight.
Yes, and then essentially
which caused a lot of kingdoms, city-states, because there wasn't really large kingdoms. The kingdoms were considered large if they had like 2 or 3 cities under their jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But they collapsed because, hey, we can't grow corn. The maize isn't growing right.
Mm-hmm. And
there's just not enough water.
And we gotta move. Because, that's another thing. The cenotes, the water, the watering holes were drying out too. Cenotes, I mean.
Yeah. So they didn't go and kind of talk a little bit about, like, okay, the other tribes, they mention a little bit where they're like, yeah, there's some other tribes here. There's like, they claim that they were the ones that left before them because they're technically people.
So what are you going to say, Greg, before that?
I was just going to say the population receded. That's a kind way of saying people starved to death.
A lot of them were
forced to flee.
and dehydrated. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so
the
then-
Aztec had to come up with explanations because, as Impsit says, yeah, they tended to 1984 their history a lot.
The Aztecs in 1984, their entire religion. I want to note this. We're pretty sure that it was one guy that during the start of the Triple Alliance basically 1984 the entire religion to focus around the Aztecs' preferred god.
Well,
Which is
in all fairness, isn't that pretty much exactly what Akhenaten of Egypt tried to do?
The difference
yes.
is he frickin' succeeded.
yes, this guy succeeded at it. Not only that, he succeeded to the point where the most concrete stuff we have about Mesoamerican mythology comes from what he possibly wrote.
Also, this is just a very obscure fact, but I just did it because it's one thing I like. People always talk about sky nomads and Tangri. People forget there used to be a bunch of other things, but no one ever remembers them. Mostly because Tangri was specifically the patron of the Mongol Empire. You can tell there's a reason why that one's a lot more remembered for a lot of reasons.
There's a reason Tangriism is mildly monotheistic, and it's entirely because of the force of effort Genghis put into it.
Didn't help that he was essentially deified.
Well, it also didn't help that when you're dealing with small tribes that usually only have a few hundred to a few thousand, it's pretty easy to force them to say, yeah, that sky god, the sky god that you kind of venerate as one of the more important guy? Yeah, well, the same name, his name is also Tengri, and he's the only one. The other ones still kind of exist, but no, this is the only one.
This is the primary god. This is the most important god.
He is.
Because even in Genghis's time, he didn't completely discount the other gods. He just kind of demoted them to, I think they were known as the 99 spirits.
Yeah, they're the second class. Like, Tengri is the big one.
Tengri is all, and that kind of happens here. And the reason why the crazy man succeeded here while Akhenaten failed was this guy responded actually quite actively to people who disagreed by sacrificing them.
By getting them sacrificed, yeah.
Akhenaten essentially went through a weird psychotic fugue early in his reign and mostly focused on building his scripture and religion in temples rather than, getting rid of the opposition like this man did.
Yeah, this guy, again, when
this
we
guy
talk about
still
how he
did it, but he focused on
he,
also getting rid of people.
This guy basically, he legitimately 1984'd it. He purged all of his political enemies. He instituted a public school system that teaches his new stuff constantly.
That's why the public school system exists, too, by the way. It's the only reason.
Yes.
It's the only reason he bothered.
Yes, it's insane. And that's one of the reasons why this is just such a fascinating area of the world, is that we have so many other tribes where we've got information about what the stuff was like before the Aztecs, but a lot of it, once the Aztecs come in and start taking them over, you see this shift. Yes.
Akhenaten was a priest. Aztec guy was a conqueror. Kind of. Akhenaten was also a king. It's just he never focused on running Egypt.
No, he just had...
What happened was because Egyptians tended to be obsessed with death, that's kind of their mortuary cult. What happened was he very much idolized his father. Because his father was a very hale and hearty guy. There's a ritual that Egyptians do after their 30th reign. He managed to do like 2 or 3 of them before dying.
Yeah, impressive.
So when he died, he didn't quite take it well. So he was like, he's become Aten, which makes sense. A lot of when Egyptian kings die, they become the new deity. But he first changed things by saying, no, he is not a new Osiris. He is not a new Horus. He is the Aten. He has become the Aten.
He's become the sun.
And he literally dedicated his entire reign to forcing all of Egypt to worship his daddy as the sun, as the disc, and claims that when he dies, he too shall become the disc.
It's really weird.
He essentially had a psychotic break because daddy died. But City of God. So Teotihuacan was in Chronicles of Darkness lore. It is not a birthplace or meeting place. Instead, what happened was it was a ring of demons. It was a group of demons who effectively wanted to play gods. So what they did, and Huichipotle is one of them, was they nudged a bunch of nomadic psychopaths, blood worshippers, down here. Which is funny, but also kind of lame, but it works kind of because this is a stone Neolithic society. You can get away with crazy things like that in Neolithic, where battles are determined by as few as a few hundred guys, you know?
Or one guy in particular just being good at killing.
Or more accurately, the demon himself comes down and uses fucking guns against Neolithic tribespeople.
Because guns that fire human teeth.
Yeah. Like...
Infrastructure is weird like that.
Yeah. I can't stress enough just how absolutely batshit, like, pre-industrial society demons must have looked.
I imagine that it's a lot of warped bone and flesh material instead of metal.
Alongside the metal, which is they talk about this in Bronze Age. It's like there's an element of acronon, like you know how to pronounce it, like
arsenical
out
bronze?
Of time.
Oh, out of
no,
anachronistic.
Thank you, anachronistic. Where like a demon might look like a cyborg back here, like. I hate to bring this up, but it's sort of like how
I can actually see that being where Talos came from, just a demon deciding to take Crete as their personal fief.
Yeah, or like you've played like the Knights of the Nine, right? Like the Song of Pelennor, where like this thing in futuristic armor and from his arm shot,
Oh yeah,
light and
well, to give you an idea, one of the dumbest myths in Elder Scrolls, and by dumbest I mean hilarious, is that the Redguard became so masterful with their blade, they are able to cut They are able to cut the uncuttable. They split Atomos, the atom, with their sword.
Yeah, they nuked their continent in a war by being so good with swords. They nuked their own homeland.
That's just so dumb, but it's
so fucking rad though. It's like
it
holy
works.
Shit.
It's kind of like how Wood Elves in Elder Scrolls. I know we're off track, but that's fine. But Wood Elves in Elder Scrolls never eat plants because of their pact with their god, their chosen deity. They can't
may or may not have
plants.
made them.
And for a time, they used to not be cannibals because it's only cannibalism if it's your own species. But they weren't above eating humans.
Mm-hmm.
They still did commit cannibalism. Wood elves are much more hardcore than people give them credit for.
Well, that's because in the game you don't really see their psychosis.
All you see is their little tiny bodies, and then their wonky,
little
like,
body, and they don't talk.
Biozura.
Yeah, they don't talk about how they blood for the blood god.
Yeah, they don't talk about their weird cannibal cult.
So what happened where demons decided to fuck with a group of nomads, and this is fair because, again, the most advanced culture at this time were the Tarascans, who very recently discovered copper. And even then, this is brand fucking new. They're working with surface deposits at this point. And before them, much further south, the Aymara peoples, Tiwanaku, the state of Tiwanaku, who also discovered how to work surface iron and actually, I think, make limited bronze tools, as long as there were impurities in the bronze ore. In the ore of copper.
Yeah.
Like, we are talking Stone Age Ooga Booga. So,
again,
demons, like a group of demons, like 4 or 5 of them, that just chose the name of their gods, or may have just made up their names.
Yeah, just like, I am a Hexala Puckle.
I'm Huichipotle. Yeah, I'm Tlaloc. Like, these 4 assholes just walking up to it like a starving herd of nomads who are dealing desperately with the fact that their water supplies dried up in North Arizona or wherever they came from. Makes sense. Especially if the Toltecs were a god machine invention.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's a lot of stuff that, you can play around with this, and you can say, nah, it's stupid, I don't want to do that. But you can definitely say, like, yeah, that happened.
Now, I'm not a fan of this sort of stuff because that's too much into the world of darkness, yet everything was caused by that which bumps in the night.
Mithras is a vampire, specifically a 5th generation Ventru.
That's a problem. And in this case, it's a bit of one, but it is feasible, especially for demons in this area, to try to find the new big dick power. And the Aztecs are a new big dick power. They just
Again, as we already
found their lake, and they're already conquering and murdering people for their sun god.
I mean, as we talked about, I think in the last section, I think that was after the fall, demons attach themselves to new power structures the same way the God Machine does.
Because they want to co-opt it before the God Machine can get their claws into it.
Yeah. Remember, they want to create a place where they don't have to worry about the God Machine. Mesoamerica was probably a decent place for that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of everything in the world of darkness being supernatural creatures. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, Holtz. To give you an idea, I've recently been listening to more and more Mage the Ascension, I think it's called.
Mage the Ascension lore is fucking just... It's a mess.
I can only listen to so many meta plots within meta plots within meta plots before my eyes start oozing out of my skull. So anyway, Teotihuacan is the weapon which they would use to break the God Machine because... Again, you could actually argue that the Mayans at least are partially, like, not a plot, but like the God Machine probably would use the classical Mayans here.
Yeah, look
and
at
other pre-states.
Look at what they did. Like the classical Mayans are a fascinating subject, and we're getting way off topic.
Are great, but we're going into this now. So Teotihuacan, essentially, the Unchained bolstered the Aztecs because they were a great game changer.
Yeah, they even talk about this. So they on a page when we get into the where we are section, on the page after that, they do talk about the truth versus the myth.
So, just some titles for those of you to look at: Bloodline of Nobility and Madness,
which is about the Toltec bloodlines.
Yep.
Which may or may not be related to Skinchangers, like
the other tribes. Which that's fine. The rise to power. Basically, the Mexica very quickly, just due to
said no, you're also people. Don't worry.
and the Aztec were just able to keep wrecking, mainly because I think of their insanity.
That, and again, they were pretty organized.
By the standards of people, especially since they were attacking an area that has recently been reestablishing itself.
Yes.
Because this was in the middle of a minor ecological crisis. So where we are. So right now at the moment, there is the current Moctezuma is the evil Lord Aku from Samurai Jack. I can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry.
Whatever his name is.
All is Aku. That's all we need to know.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, the Moctezuma is big dick, and all the world knows of the Aztec and the fact that they can just kind of slaughter you. And ways to avoid being slaughtered are to offer things like textiles, chocolate, cocoa powder, because cocoa beans were a very viable trade source. Very, very important. Cloth, stone, and slaves. Slaves were a very common one. And also sacrifices. A city could literally just say, oh yeah, we'll send 100 people to be murdered in the blood pits.
Yep.
And that could be taken just fine.
Yeah. It's also notable that in general, the transition of power within the Aztecs was not too violent, as dumb as that sounds. They do come and take a look at all these other places and tribes and get into fights with them and all that, but usually the transition of power between king to king is pretty peaceful by monarchy standards. There hasn't really been a big civil war yet.
Although that may be because the Aztecs at the end of the day only lasted about 100 years.
Yeah.
It's possible, especially given there were massive tensions from their client states at that point.
Right. When they go into the daily life section, which I think is where we get kind of in, the point is that
this is good for people who want to learn about it. Basically, Aztecs, the rich were very rich. They could kind of do whatever as long as they kept themselves fit for war. But the workers themselves did a lot of things, the most common of which were either fishermen. By the way, I think the taboo on fish was an Egyptian thing. Sorry, I got that confused because, But it was fishing. That's important. harvesting corn and textile workers. And cocoa beans is offering, cocoa beans were one of the more valuable profits because it was kind of a pain to actually process them because it takes time for
Yes.
them to dry. They're kind of demanding to a degree. They have a certain climate. And on top of that, the cocoa that you're used to is not what the Aztecs did. Instead, it was kind of like hot cocoa. The difference is it was mildly bitter and fairly spicy because what they introduced to it was more heat than sweet. They didn't really have access to sugar, so it was a bitter, spicy drink.
Yeah. The other thing to note is that Aztec families are kind of in a little bit weird because you could have polygamy, you could have monogamy, you could have.
Oh yeah, because
what's the female term? Polygyny.
Polygyny, yeah. Because the thing is, each house can store up to 3 families. So the Soviet era block housing, where you cram like 10 families in an apartment designed to hold like 3, that is what the Aztec did.
Usually it would be brothers that would bring their wives into a new home and then live together from there. So you had your extended family there.
And on top of that, because of the way Aztecs works, any hole's a goal.
Yeah. Well,
any hole's a goal.
Somewhat. It's less that, and it's more like as long as you're not cheating, it's okay.
That's the thing. If everyone's free with swinging, you can swing. Because right here, fidelity and honesty. Those are their big values.
Adultery is incredibly harshly punished. Being a freak isn't, to some degree. But, they also punish children very harshly because that's usually common among basically all cultures.
They were punished severely, and they were punished severely.
Yeah. Cuts, beatings, and forced inhalation of chili smoke.
That's a punishment. Yes, you literally can hurt them with chili smoke.
That's one of the worst, honestly. Like, imagine, if you will, like, smoke getting in your eyes that is also like pepper spray.
Yeah, because that's why it hurts so much. Also, actually, because of where they are, there's a Mexican plant I know of called the fire stick.
Yeah.
So I can see a very angry Aztec parent slapping their child with the fire stick while they're wearing a glove.
Yeah. Again, also what was very common was cutting, and then rubbing your hands in like chili powders and things like that. And beatings, as is tradition. The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Well, in this case, the beatings will continue until discipline improves.
Yes.
Yeah, beating will continue until you stop being
regulated. It's very strict and regulated. There's not exactly like there's a very high pressure to conform within their society. Mainly
because if you don't, you get sacrificed.
Yes, that's the other big one. When we get to like the religion aspect of it, I'll get more into like a bit about that. So they
also,
talk
kids
about
learn young. They learn on the job that the Aztecs were firm believers in take your kid to work day. The difference is you also showed them how you did your job because they're going to do it when you're dead.
Yes, it's a very much an apprentice, a full-time apprenticeship.
The only difference is you're with your family. Yeah, the difference is rather than having some random bumbo, it's literally Pop teaches you how to make cocoa.
Father, uncle teaches you this.
Or mom teaches you how to make glorious silk scarves or how to carve jewelry.
Yeah. Then there's a public education,
which is love Moctezuma, eat the bugs, live in the pod, sacrifice for the state.
Yeah, and then there's a further finishing school for the nobility. Simple, pretty common among a lot of ancient societies that had like a public education system. Not a lot of them, but
By the way, here's the screwed up part. Noble children are actually pushed even harder than their commoners. Because
they are.
They didn't have to just learn the trade. They had to be the best at it.
Remember, they're expected to by blood. It's also important to note that gender roles are very firm.
And that's why the story we skipped, it's interesting. It gives you some insight. But yeah, if you're kind of free willing, if you're gonna try to make like a woman priest, that's not happening in Aztec society.
There were
specific gods.
They were specific deities usually, and they were also kind of like on their own. Like a lot of cultures, when you have a female religious
You have a
figure,
convent system.
you have either a convent system or a system where it's like if you're a devotee to him, you live out in the woods, away from the rest of us.
So yeah, and that applies here. The division of authority is women manage the household, the internal affairs, while men manage
Men
the
have
outside.
to fight. This is one of the big things about the Aztec society. Is
All
what I
men
mentioned,
must
is
fight.
that all men learn how to fight. That was part of public schooling. Was they teach you how to beat the shit out of each other with clubs.
Here's the best part, though. This is one of the only ways you can advance. So if you are a dirt farmer, a stick picker, to use the Glorantha term, the poorest of the poor farmer, if you manage to channel Huichi Potley and just murder as much as you can, or
If you
actually,
take a bunch of captives, if
you
you
have
take
to
a bunch
capture.
of captives,
It's not
or you
murder.
defeat like a champion.
That's the thing.
If you
It's
defeat
not
like
murder.
Yeah. Or you like defeat a champion in single combat or something like that. Like, you're gonna be honored,
And you get promoted. That's one of the only ways.
and if you don't, like, there's
You just
there's
go
a sort
back
of a
to what your
tour of
pops
service.
did.
You just go back to doing what you did. Women marry earlier than men, as is pretty usual. But what's most important is matchmaking. Matchmaking is incredibly important to the Aztecs.
Which is funny. I'm a little off track, but I know a little bit more about this from the Inca culture, which matchmaking was also extremely important. To the point where in Incan cultures, they actually had mummies called spirits in mummies called huacas.
yes.
And what they would do is they would either go to the simplest one is to go to the family huaca and have the priest discern what the spirit / ghost of your
Spirit
ancestors,
says marry this person.
or the spirit says,
Basically.
or based on the signs, the spirit says no.
Spirit says yes, but it has to be this day, or like
And that's the cheaper option, and this is what most people did. But if
Yeah.
you were wealthier, like you were, say, the Sapa Inca or one of the nobles, you could go to one of the two greatest temples that they had. I forget the name of them, but you could go to one of those two oracles. And they usually had a lot more pomp and circumstance, obviously, because they're very important religiously. And it's actually a point of pride if you're able to swing into that.
Yeah, it's also.
But the
important to
thing
note
is,
that
ultimately, if the mummy says no, you can't.
you can't.
You could break it, but it's seen as ill fortune, and you're likely
seen
going
as
to be
bad fortune
ostracized.
Rarely it works out because of the societal pressure around these sort of couples. Again, not uncommon in these sort of societies. It's also important to note that Aztec culture views childbirth as a war. Essentially, a woman who dies in childbirth is given a warrior's funeral.
By the way, be gone, Gavier. You are a bot, because I don't know what that means.
Hold on.
I removed it.
Vom.red. Yeah, that's
Be gone, bot.
Be
I think
gone,
that's
bot.
vampire. I would have thought no.
No, there's
no,
no
that-
T. That's an O.
No.
That's not a T. Be gone, bot.
So here's the thing: women, they're pretty much stuck to the house, but they can still gain respect if they're really good at matchmaking.
Yes, matchmaking or other like weaving
Also,
tasks.
midwives are very important too.
Midwives are incredibly important. We're gonna get to the sacrifices.
We haven't gotten to the sacrifice. We have gotten to
That's
how, Paul Verhoeven's take on Starship Troopers. That's kind of how the Aztec do. Only instead of killing the bugs, you capture them to throw to the sacrifice pit.
But
they talk about
unsurprisingly,
the
in a culture in a culture that exalts war, people who make more babies and therefore more warriors to add to the state are considered a valuable resource.
Yeah. They also mention that the
A way around this is because you live usually with brothers, like live in the same house. You can kind of get around that by just doing what are called cooperatives, where you split it.
Yeah. There's a decent amount of that happening. Like if you're low on the totem pole, everybody's pulling their weight.
But
It's
and
just
last but
one
not
of those
least, there's the crazy women that live in the woods called the Chichotulaca, which
Yeah, if you ever deem them a name. I'm not 100% sure if this is something that they made up.
it might
or
be
not,
it's probably a World of Darkness, because the Chronicles of Darkness Onyx Path decision.
But
Because
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't, because I'm pretty sure the Aztecs had.
the Aztecs did have
witches.
something like that for witches and priestesses. Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So
No, the
mentioned-
flaying didn't fully happen. You didn't flay the
we're
kid to
not
death.
quite.
You just cut
We're
them.
not quite yet.
You just
not
pulled a
quite
knife out and cut them.
So we're going to talk a little bit here about.
So yeah, education. State education is mandatory. It is a
Yeah.
symbol of authority and superiority and unity. And
You're usually there for 7 to 10 years.
the House of Youth, and basically what they do is they tell you things like the stuff from They Live, like obey, procreate, obey, consume,
Live in the pod, eat the chili con carne.
eat the chili
Like,
con carne made of people
also-
and dogs.
Also, lip piercings. You would get a lip piercing to show that you were one of us, you know?
For the priesthood.
Priesthood would get scarification.
Oh yeah, and if you were at the House of Education, you got the lip.
Yes. So basically, everybody got a lip piercing.
By the way,
Kinda-
the public education school also kind of has a little bit of their own ROTC, because the last couple of years for boys, they have to learn how to fight.
As I mentioned, they teach you how to beat the shit out of each other in there. They then go into talking about the food, which is, again, maize. Obviously, they also mention beans are popular. Chili peppers are very
Here you
common.
got tortillas, tamales,
Squash,
pozole,
tomatoes,
corn on the cob.
honeys, cherries, insects, fish, even farmed algae.
Yep, cherries, insects, fish, algae. Prickly pear is also a very common one too.
Fish from the sea fish are considered a rarity, and some nobility actually eat sea fish every day because they can import it all the way from the coast, which is impressive.
Pretty good, given they never had a coastline.
Yeah.
And they don't have wheels.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. They also mention how your piercings will talk about things. So, for example, everybody in their point in society has a kind of...
They have a dress code. Each level of society has a legit dress code.
They have a dress code. They have a haircut style that you must follow. For example, priests also are not supposed to wash their hair, which sounds really disgusting, honestly.
It is. It's quite horrifying.
And
And
especially because there's a lot of blood in that hair. Well, we're about to get to the talk about why Aztec religion is probably kind of brutal, and I want to mention maize as part of this. So one of the things about maize is that compared to a lot of other crops, the life cycle of corn and how you get it to be consumable is quite different. You literally have to peel it apart to get to the grain. And it's red on the inside, a lot like flesh. And the corn kernels are kind of yellow, a lot like fat under skin. This is why the god of fertility in agriculture is the flayed god. I'm dead serious.
there's a bit from Smiling Friends where the demon is beaten to death and they start ripping the skin apart. And I'm just envisioning that's how the Aztecs see how you shuck corn.
That's basically the equivalent.
I mean,
Is
when you
that
really
the-
think about it, isn't farming just mass genocide, mass planned genocide of vegetables?
So they then go in about like the various parts of the priesthood.
The ear and lip
So
plugs,
obvious-
here's priest life, yeah.
Yeah.
They live they live clean chast lives. It's just they refuse to clean their hair.
By clean, by what I mean, they avoid unclean things. They don't do all this. They fast. They cut themselves to bleed for the gods. They'll do heavy labor as essentially like to show that they're devoted to work and to the society.
Because asceticism is
work.
a good way to inflict societal control, because you can guilt people into being more like these guys.
Yes. And then on top of that, they have a very distinctive dress code. They always wear a black cloak. Their hair is always long
And
and
dirty
always
as
matted.
hell.
They cannot marry except for a few exceptions.
On top of that, the highest of these priests are those to Huichipotli and Tlaloc.
They're usually elected. This is kind of interesting when you consider Aztec society as a whole is very caste structured.
And
Again, usually
yet
it's nobility.
despite this, well, here's the thing. Despite this, you can actually get some random hermit
elected as a high priest. Yes, it's a
It
lot
doesn't
like the
happen
papacy.
often. It doesn't happen often, but it can.
They also then talk about the gods of, for example, magic is very well known. There's different kinds of priests as well. There's your sun priests or fire priests. There's like
Well, the
your
fire
teacher
priests are noted because they're the ones that do the sacrifice. They wield the knife to cut open the chest.
Yes. The priests
There's
of,
the teacher priests, which are the Tlalamini, the
then there's the
Nahuatl,
magic priests.
which are the gods of magic. And
Uh,
these are in the Chronicles
These
of
are we
Darkness.
live out in the woods. We live out in the woods, and we yell at people who come too close about how we'll summon lightning at them. Basically, these are the schizophrenics.
Either that, or
Like,
they're the ones that either that, or they're the ones that actually are the Skinchangers.
it's also important that these are the ones that advise the Aztecs to take the idol of a god from the Husitic, and that they stole the god of magic, basically, which I find really funny.
Oh yeah,
There's
because the
also-
Huastec are an interesting batch, by the way, for those wondering. They're far north in Mexico, near the border of Texas, actually. And yet,
Yes.
despite that, they are culturally and linguistically tied to the Mayans.
Yes,
Like
they're kinda
they
weird.
are a Mayan-speaking people that absorbed the standard Mesoamerican culture. They had a few of their
Yes.
own unique gods. I believe their focus was Quetzalcoatl as a wind god, but they had a magic god as well.
Yes. Then we can go into this is the other big thing about the Aztecs: true names and divination. They were very, very, very focused on this, much like the Egyptians. The true name is incredibly powerful because it can inform everything about you.
Yeah, and it can become lost, and if that's the case, well,
You're fucked.
yeah. You also
So-
use it to curse people.
Yes, you do. There's also the female priesthood, which is the priesthood of the maize. Obviously, these are the growing, the fertility, all that.
And this is how you remove the skin and fat, children. So you
Yeah.
can look at the succulent.
They don't actually do
delicious meat.
sacrifices. They can't actually do sacrifices.
I know, but like because corn is under the flayed god, I'm just kind of like emphasizing that.
Yeah, it's also notable that when they come to warfare, is that people go on about how the Aztecs liked to just capture people all the time. They didn't always do that. No, they'd kill people if they needed to.
Well, yeah, I
The-
mean,
the main thing is
sometimes
it was just
they
more prestigious.
conquer. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just more prestigious if you could capture someone. It's not. Again, they would kill. They would often kill. It's just that pride of place was taken to capturing an enemy.
mainly because also there's the benefit of we don't have to bleed our own population to power the sun,
Yeah, this is where the ritual wars of the flower wars would come in.
and this is why they got their asses destroyed by one Spanish boy and his 100 men.
Because everyone around them hated their fucking guts.
And on top of that, because they did ritualize, I captured you, you had to fucking stick with it, usually.
Yeah, to some degree, because they thought that they could just get away with a flower war. They couldn't.
And then the
Against their-
Spanish ignored all of those rule conventions and just kept shooting them.
It's less so than you'd think. The Aztecs, once they realized that the Spaniards are a
Don't
threat,
play the
didn't
game.
come at them to kill. They didn't play the game anymore. Originally they're like, this looks like some weird flower war thing. We're gonna look at it, and then they're like, oh wait, no, this isn't the case, and they immediately went to
War of Conquest
just
it
murder
is.
War of Conquest it is.
And then the
And they
Tlaxcala
lost.
destroyed them.
Yeah, and then they fucking lost. So the so they basically talk about like
Well, yeah, first off, economic, because it's a lot easier to conquer a city or force it under tribute so that you can get
if
stuff
just
you
do a
don't have.
small- Yeah, and you don't have to siege a city. That's kind of a pain in the ass.
The flower wars were only, we need to supplement, and literally it's better to use not people to power the sun than real people.
Yeah. Well, they're technically people, they're just not Mexico, so they don't really count.
So that's fine. Like, that way we don't lose important people to this. That's literally, the justification is it's still people, but in reality it's so we don't burn through our own stock of population.
They also mention
They go into detail about wars, and it always opens with ranged attacks until about 80 yards. They go into detail about how warfare works for those curious.
yeah, they had archers, they didn't use them as much. They preferred darts and slings.
And what always begins are the champions going first. Those are the most experienced or just the craziest. And
Yep.
what the Aztecs did, and this is probably why they won so much, they mixed experience into units. So it wasn't purely like this is a pure green unit. What they'll do after a battle is they'll mix them up so that the unblooded are kind of with blooded ones.
They're led by blooded people. It's very similar to what the to what the Zulu did, actually, where they'd have your officer, they'd have these units consisting entirely of like unblooded young men, but they'd have them led by an experienced man, and then their veteran units also alongside them.
Only
So that
the
you'd
Aztecs
have-
would intermix them.
Yeah, the Aztecs, however, would filter in new blood into these older units in order to make sure that these younger men get an idea of fighting from people who've actually done it. Basically, they're casserole units.
On top of that, what the Aztecs did that other people didn't, and this is why they kept winning, they actually understood the concept of reserves. So what they would do is they would cycle in units, fresh units, after blooded units who are tired from combat need to fall back because they're because swinging a club all day does make you tired. So they'll cycle in fresh units, and effectively they had a reserve in battle. Which is what the Zulu also had. Zulu had the concept of there's the horns, the head, and I think the loins.
The horns of the bull. Basically, like you have one horn go one direction, you pincer them in, and you crush them together. The Zulu were very, very effective.
And the Aztecs have a lot of that traits in them.
Yes.
Because, and that's probably why they won so much.
It's a system that works in order to get, if you're talking about a pre-industrial warfare, it's a very efficient system. Especially if you're talking about like organizing things.
Especially in a Stone Age society.
Especially in a Stone Age society, or even like an Iron Age society, or even like a post-Iron Age, like feudal society to some degree. Like the Aztecs kind of were a feudal society. They had various nobles that controlled various points of land and could raise their own armies. It's just that everyone also then was part of the larger army and was trained to be part and work in that larger force.
There's one more thing that made the Aztecs so good, though. Their concept of honor is all about the win, baby. They don't fucking care how they get the win.
Oh yeah, no. The people go like the Aztecs were fighting like a ritual coming. It's like no, by like the second battle, they were already like, we understand what cannons do. So hit the fucking deck and crawl at them and try to cut their knees open or something.
And the Aztecs are not about like in a flower war. Sure, they'll do coups and stuff, but what they'll also frickin' do is if this is a tough opponent, what they might do is just gang up like 5 guys on one. Because, hey, it's still a win. It's still a capture.
It's still a win. It's... Yeah.
The Aztecs fought dirty.
They did. They tried not to talk about this. But from what we've seen from their own writings and talking about some of their own like stuff and what other people said about them, they were more than happy to fight dirty.
And the thing is, it's not in response to another group fighting dirty, although if the commander isn't initially, if they see, like, let's say Tlaxcala do something nasty, they'll instantly respond going, okay, all gloves off, baby.
It's a lot like, I hate to say it, it's a lot like clanner culture in that regard. Once the rules are broken, it's free game for everything.
Well, no, even in the rules, because again, Aztecs only care about winning, so...
Yeah. It's
like if the clanners have an idea, but at the same time, win is more important than the ritual.
Honor, yeah.
Well, like, no, the win is honor. If you lose, that's way more
that's
dishonor than if
that's what some. Admittedly, that's what some clans kind of view it as. It's like once the rules are broken by somebody, it's free fucking game.
It's not even that. Like you're emphasizing, because from what I'm seeing, the Aztecs value any tactic that succeeds. So that means that just winning is like, even if you do it fighting the dirtiest, the win's much more important. So they don't even have to worry about the rules being broken.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
It depends on the commander. It does depend on the commander because, again, flower wars are, you're supposed to provoke your
very different.
Yeah, flower wars are more ritualized, and in those cases, commanders probably won't fight dirty because they need to see which of their men are blooded enough to be promoted. Because if you keep fighting dirty, well, A, it does piss them off faster, but B, you also don't get an idea on who you can promote if you just have them like gang beat one dude. Or like stab them in the back, or all the other things.
Yeah,
the Aztecs had a special force. Yeah, I think they were called. I think
the Shorn ones. I think is what you're talking about. There's a lot of the Aztecs had a lot of divisions within their army for special warriors. They probably do talk about that later on in this.
Also, another thing the Aztecs were known for, by the way, ambushes. They were specialists.
They loved ambushes. Because again, it wins. It works. They also had a lot of goldsmithing. We're going to get into that in a second here when we talk about their economy.
We went into Flower Wars. We can kind of skip that. Basically,
Yeah.
we capture people to sacrifice because they're people, but only technically.
The other bonus effect is that it bloods new warriors relatively safely.
Yeah, because in a Flower War, they know, because the thing is, the captures are not necessarily sacrifices. It's just they're the most known. It's also a way to get slaves or craftsmen, or just like indentured craftsmen. Like,
it's also a great way to train younger recruits because you're less likely to lose them, and it gives them larger unit experience. It's basically a drill, a very violent drill.
It's war games where you actually have live ammunition.
Yeah.
As for economy, Tenochtitlan, it relied on trade to really be as powerful as it was.
There's no way it could survive without it.
Because it's built in a salt lake.
Yeah, there's actually an entire caste basically of merchants, which are called the Pochteka. They're traders that are
and there's also the Great Market.
Yes, they're authorized to leave the actual area. The main thing to note is that Tenochtitlan by this point is almost 250,000 people in a city. This is larger than
London.
This is not only larger than London. This is larger than London and Paris combined. I think at this point.
At this point, it's the largest city in the world.
It is either the largest or the second largest, depending on whether or not you believe that Alexandria could have been bigger, or whether or not one of the Chinese cities.
Not under the Mamluks, but maybe a Chinese city somewhere.
Maybe a Chinese city somewhere, perhaps Constantinople after the repopulation. Maybe
not at this point because it's the 1400s.
Yeah.
So the Pochteka, they're not just merchants though. Like you mentioned that they're given warrants. They're like rogue traders from 40K.
Yeah. They're not.
But they're not just purely traders. They're also spies.
They're also often spies. The main thing is that because of this, and because they're well known about it, is that it actually makes it harder to get rid of them.
Because
which means that your trading is better.
Here's the thing, though. If you let them go, your economy is much more likely to be dominated because they know exactly what you need, and the Aztecs can focus on, the Mexicans can focus on that. But the problem is, if you kill them, they're not going to do a flower war in response to that. No, they're going to conquer you. They're not going to just capture you or force you to tribute. No, they're killing you.
Yeah. This is the fact of it.
So it's either be economically dominated or literally be conquered and fed to the sun.
Then there are the other versions of traders, the Tatalamene, which are the slave traders.
Yep, the Tlatanme. Those are the slave guys.
Nahulos the Mecca, which basically are... Yeah, these are basically your deep cover spies. When they are caught, they are killed basically immediately for obvious reasons, and sometimes ritually eaten.
On top of that, they are more spies than merchants because they try to disguise themselves as natives.
Yeah. They then talk about the Aztec cosmology.
Yeah, here we go. These are the basics.
Oh boy, this is fucking complicated. They have
13 levels of celestial realms. They don't encompass what's good. It concludes everything needed for life, excepting the earth itself and human sacrifice.
So there's this giant. There's the home of the hermaphroditic creator god.
Then there's red, yellow, and white
3 layers of sky, which could sometimes be seen from Earth depending on the time of day. Then a sky of ice and rays, a blue-green sky of wind, a sky of dust, the sky of stars, of fire and smoke. The home of the goddess of salt and birds. Then the sun. Then the Milky Way. Then Tylok, which is
and the rain god's house.
The moon.
So basically,
Earth is another one.
The Aztecs, rather than believe there's one sky, like the Romans and even the Etruscans looked at the sky and said, there is one. And outside there is the celestial boundary. No, the Aztecs are like, no, each weather condition is its own fucking sky.
Yeah.
The morning sun, the morning sky is a sky. The afternoon sky is a sky. That white sky where it's all foggy and hazy, that's a sky layer.
Yeah.
Dust storms, another sky layer.
Yeah.
Snow, that's another sky layer. It's like an onion.
Then there's 9 layers of the underworld.
Yep.
Obviously. This isn't
There's where the
unusual.
water goes. That's where the mountains begin. Where you find the obsidian, because obsidian was extremely important ritualistically and culturally.
Yeah, frozen winds, where flags tremble, where people are flayed,
And then
where the dead
eternal,
lie
and
in
then
the
Mictlan.
darkness, and then Mictlan. So then there's the Earth itself, which is just sort of like,
Here you go. Here's the directions. Center
it
has
sometimes
none.
is also it sometimes is also a fucking abomination. Sometimes it isn't. It depends.
Now, there's a lot of gods. The most important is Huitzilopochtli, which, that's the one, the crazy Aztec founder who, I don't know his name, but I'm just going to call him Moctezuma because that's the title.
Yeah. Then there's Tylok, and then Tunatu, who is, again, as I mentioned, just an aspect of Huitzilopochtli. Specifically,
and
his wolf son.
Talaloc was probably a Nahuatl one.
Tylok was almost certainly a Nahuatl one. All of these gods almost certainly are Nahuatl. It's just that
what the Aztecs did with them. I was thinking how the Aztecs handled their forces sound like the first JF incursions.
Kind of. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't. You're not wrong.
So we kind of covered the
not
basics
fully
about
right.
the gods. So I'm going to kind of skip most of it. They do believe in lesser gods and spirits, though, like the Tlaloque, which are the most common. They're servants of Tlaloc. And honestly, the thing about Mexico is rain is super important because it is outside of the rain, even in rainforests, because there's actually a surprising lack of water down there.
Yes, it's very important to see like all these.
And most of their water sources are either from rivers, which are very important, or what are called cenotes, especially as you get further south, which are big pits filled with water. If those dry up, you're screwed.
Yep, that's what happened to the Maya. So we get further in on.
Here's the afterlife. Most Aztec go to Mictlan when they die.
It doesn't really. If it isn't specific, yeah, you're there, and you're buried with a dog sometimes, because the dog needs to take you there.
It takes time for you to dissipate, by the way, and there are some exceptions. If you drown,
yeah. If you drown, it's kind of nice, actually. Like, if you get hit by lightning and die, it's like, hey, Tylok kind of liked you. If you died in war, you go to the Sun Heaven, which is a place of honor, and infants
like Valhalla.
Yeah, and then infants also have their special heaven, which is kind of an interesting, kind of like, that's kind of neat.
Basically, this tree takes care of them until, rather than deal with the whole, when a baby dies, they're stuck in limbo for eternity, that kind of some Christian doctrine espouses. The Aztec were like, no. Because they didn't have a chance to live. This is where they're tended to until they are given another chance.
Yeah.
So they did believe in a limited reincarnation, but only for infants and stillborn.
Which is interesting.
Basically, I think the concept was they didn't have a chance at life, really.
Yeah, so obviously, like, the gods are going to send them back again.
They get that chance. They get a freebie.
Yeah. Also, human sacrifice usually go to the Sun Heaven. This is definitely part of, like, we're trying to convince people to be okay with being sacrificed.
Like, if you're sacrificed, you're going to pretty much the best heaven. Tlaloc's heaven's also pretty good, though.
I want to talk just shortly about this sort of thing. So, as an interesting thing to note is that when people were being lined up to be sacrificed, oftentimes what would happen is that other people would come to them with their problems and say, like, hey, can you talk to the gods about this? And it was part of the duty of a lot of these human sacrifices to basically be like a way for the society to be able to express what their problems were.
Wait, so you're saying the Aztecs believed in Festivus where they aired their grievances to the gods?
Yes. So you'd be like, yeah, my goat died. Could you ask Tylok about that?
No. My goat died as well as my neighbors, their neighbors. There's been an issue with goats.
Yeah.
On top of that, the maize is tasting a bit funny, and I think I see 5 of you, son.
Yeah, like we could you ask somebody about that? And then, of course, they're supposed to be like, yes, of course.
But here's my thinking, just the comedy, because I didn't know about the Tlaloc heaven. Imagine if they're about to be sacrificed and a lightning bolt strikes them.
That happens. That's like a huge sign that the gods are really happy about this one. Like,
well, you like Talal like rushed ahead, like, no, this one's mine.
nope, this one's mine. This one's mine. Dibs. Called dibs. They didn't go and they also like
They didn't have
were
a chance to
very willing-
sacrifice a fool. Send them back
Yeah,
for the babies.
they also talk about to some degree that the more willing ones would basically go around and talk to various people in the town before they were supposed to be killed, because that was what was expected for them to do. There are, of course, those that tried to flee and tried to run away and all that, and were screaming about like, "Oh God, why?" But a lot of them kind of went semi-willingly.
Kind of
because
like
it
the
was-
pigeons who got sucked into the grain silo in Russia.
Yeah, where it's like, like, oh, I
like
mean,
some
I
of the,
guess
you
if
see
I'm-
them fly away, but then they're like, oh, whatever, I embrace death. Zoop. But yeah. So current events. Currently, the evil, all is Aku. Moctezuma Aku is currently ruling over the Aztecs' greatest years.
Yes. This is kind of pretty great. Like the fact is that
Also, their last.
Their last strong
It's
king, yeah. They go into details about his reign.
yeah. They're talking about the current events. Basically, that the Great Temple is being completed at this point. There is a lot of exaggerations about the amount of people sacrificed. Quite frankly, the Spanish exaggerate this quite a bit.
Even then, still, there's a reason the Aztec society could arguably be seen as one of the most evil cultures made.
One of the most brutal cultures when you consider where they're from, when like the nature of what they eat possibly informing their view of what people are. Because of how similar it is to a person that loses their skin. Like, there's a lot of reasons you can imagine, and it's like every time they have the opportunity to take the off ramp to just like an insane metal shit, they just hit the fucking gas harder.
Most primitive tribal societies primitive, subjective, but whatever, you know what I mean. Essentially, they tend to give up some of those more hard elements as they actually start to settle and develop institutions. The Aztecs just doubled down.
Yeah,
the Aztecs just went like, hell fucking no, we're going harder.
I think the only thing they stopped doing is skinning humans
realized,
alive.
No,
And
they still did that.
No, I mean, and
Yeah.
dancing in them.
I just realized
they still did that.
Oh,
this is a bad thing. But so the Aztecs are essentially our version of Nej, if you understand that reference without me saying the name of the current country that it's called, old and possibly, and having things said.
So anyway, other things Evil Lord Aku did was he finished the temple to Huitzilopochtli. This is not the first time Moctezuma has said that they finished it, by the way.
Yeah, they probably built the second one.
It's
or they
just
built a small complex, or they built another level, or whatever.
This guy just
Or there
he
was an
put
earthquake,
so much
or there
money.
was just an earth,
Or
or
there
it
was an
started falling
earthquake,
apart.
and they had to fix it. This was most likely renovations and enlargements.
Well, no, like apparently based on details, he spent a lot, like years, updating and expanding it. So this is a full overhaul.
This is a very
Unlike
big
the other
deal
guys.
for everyone. There's also some major wildfires.
Yep.
Various military
A lot of
exclusions.
military stuff. Royal hunt for his namesake. Oh, someone declaring that he'll either eat its flesh and gain the cunning. Wait. Declares a royal hunt for its namesake. Is a Hideously is a legendary creature that lives in the rivers and has a taste for human flesh. Covered in spikes, it has hands like a man and another on the end of its tail. So, magical alligator monster.
Yeah.
And he'll either eat its flesh or live forever in the paradise.
He doesn't say what happened. There's some rumors that he encountered a god instead and got forbidden wisdom. There's some rumors that he just didn't mean anything. The trickster sorcerers are also gained more power during this era to some degree. And then it's really weird how he dies. He may have been mentally ill and got killed
because
by falling
remember,
masonry.
No, remember, there is one specific disease that is endemic to the New World.
You're right.
And mental illness is mental illness is the third neurogenic stage of syphilis.
So he might have literally caught syphilis from some
decades
weird hooker out in the
ago.
mountains.
Decades ago, because it takes like 20 years for you to get to the full neurogenic brain damage level that
And
syphilis has.
then of course he insists it's not from the gods. The priests are like, this has to be from the gods. Like, like this is a gift. He's like, no, I fucked some diseased whore sometime in the past. Like, come on. And then
then he
dies
just
when-
has a seizure. It looks like, based on him staring blankly, he was having multiple seizures, like the
he was either
absence
having
seizures
he was either having a seizure
or
was just, like,
depression.
depression, and just stood under like a collapsing roof until the fucking masonry killed him.
That's awesome.
Which is just like,
It's
as
an
far
interesting
as-
way to go. It's
Yeah.
up there with Samson breaking the temple of the Philistines.
This is one of those weird deaths on par with like the guy that got killed by a falling tortoise. Like,
Oh yeah, the Greek there's a Greek philosopher, fun fact, who died from that. There's also
Yeah.
another one, I forget his name.
he died from laughter at a donkey eating figs. Which,
No, my favorite one is he was a pre-Aristotelian, pre-Platonic philosopher who, to declare his own immortality, because he believed in some strain of philosophy where belief is what matters, he yeets himself into Mount Etna. He literally does a flip into a fucking volcano to prove his immortality.
Didn't come back out, I guess. No, admittedly, if he had, that would have been like the most rad flip of all time. Like, just like...
There's a lot of fun
Oh,
Greek
man.
philosophers' death, but this one's up par. This one is easily on par with
that's
one.
up there. Yeah. So when he dies, you get Montezuma II,
who he reigns for a good while, actually.
he is kind of like even more superstitious than everyone else, which is
Well,
saying
yeah, his
something.
dad died under strange circumstances.
When we talk about like that the Aztecs were kind of like zealots, religious zealots.
Moctezuma was
This
more
is-
than normal.
Yeah.
To give you an idea, there's a philosophy. What was it? The whole Spaniard thing was based on the fact that one of the messenger spirits of one of the gods was known to have like basically skin like that of pale bleached bone skin, sort of.
Yeah. There was also like other signs and
It was
all
like
this
a
other
host
dumb
of great
shit.
ships, like far larger than any of the Aztecs could build, or something like that.
Yeah, it's also important to note that he tries to create a much more noble-focused society, which definitely shook things up and definitely didn't help his situation.
Some people or ancient folks were really crazy. Oh, there's still some contemporary folks that are horribly crazy, like going back to the Zulu. Shaka Zulu's madness is a story of legend.
Yeah, the man
He
was
once
a little bit
murdered
fucking
every
insane.
cattle under the Zulu, every cow under the Zulu,
We're
because
not
his
sure if that
mom
was-
died or something like that.
Yeah, like
The moment his mom died, he basically.
he tried. He had a mental breakdown basically.
I think he also made it so that you could not have sex or you were put instantly to death.
Yeah,
Like, the man was nuts.
at the end, yeah.
He banned farming, I think. He also banned like drinking milk.
Yeah. Again, when we're talking about like all this sort of shit, is that Montezuma radically restructures Aztec society, and the result of it is constant civil war.
Because his first action was to essentially replace
the
a
social
lot of
mobility in also yeet the social mobility into the sun.
Because again, if you were really a good warrior, even if you were like a potter at one point, like a dude who did ceramics, you could become a noble just because you killed like 3,000 guys over your life.
Yeah, and it kind of also happens that he also starts executing nobles, and it just does not go well.
That's the big thing, because in Aztec society there were warrior lodges, and one of the more noted ones were the Eagle Warriors.
And he tried to get rid of them.
It did not go well.
It was not happy for people. This is part of the reason why there were so many rebellions, is that for a lot of these other cities that are seeing.
By the way,
this,
if you're
like,
wondering why, the Eagle Society were a lot of nobles. It was a nobles drinking club and warrior lodge, basically, kind of like one part Freemason, one part buddy like veterans association.
Yeah.
The Jaguar warriors escaped death literally because they were able to argue, so many of us came from commoners, it doesn't matter. We never really had much power anyway.
It's
because
actually
there's
that they
another
were full of
veterans
nobles.
lodge.
They're full of nobles, is what they said. There's no commoners that hold any important positions.
Oh yeah, no commoners. So Eagles was the opposite.
Eagles was just more common. The other bit about this is the tax increases, and of course these don't apply to the original members of the Triple Alliance. He removes
don't
their
forget him
voices as
kidnapping
local
all
affairs.
of their children.
Oh yeah, there's also that. So suddenly you get this case of there's a bunch of other cities that are rebelling. There's constant flower wars happening. And the king is sitting drinking chocolate and listening to these fucking insane sorcerers talking about how like the end of the world is coming and you need to give us a bunch more funding and sacrifices.
But the thing is, for them, the end of the world is coming.
Yeah, it was. It fucking was.
Apocalypto.
They were right. What's the term? They were right for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, they were completely correct for the wrong reasons.
It's also important to note that like a lot of the
here's the philosophy. A comet streaked across the sky. Disaster comes. Powerful. Actually, wasn't that around the time Halley's Comet made a pass?
Yes, it was.
Oh, so it's like the event of EU4 -1 stability.
-1 stability. We need to make some human sacrifices.
But they were like, powerful strangers will come, and with them, the end of our empire.
That's one of those stories where that might be true, that might not be true.
Who knows?
That sounds a lot like a Spanish thing.
It's probably a Spanish thing.
But we do know that there was a wailing woman in the streets at one point, and like there was a ghostly woman in the streets wailing about something, and there was like an earthquake. And
on top of that, Montezuma did other horrible, stupid things, like murder a lot of his traders.
And also
his merchant spies.
Lot of his,
he murdered so many merchant spies.
Yeah, so you wonder why the Aztec Empire collapsed like it did. It's literally this one fucking guy.
Well, I mean, the Aztec Empire's innate structure was fragile.
Disease. Well, that and disease.
Disease did it,
yes, but the disease was a little bit later.
The innate structure, though, of the Mexica Triple Alliance was always kind of crappy.
It was never very good, but it's like
it could hold as long as you had a king that wasn't like Montezuma.
Wasn't like Montezuma. Yeah, basically. Wasn't like Montezuma in every single way.
I'm going to instantly remove all the disgusting normals who breathe my air from this palace.
Normies, get out.
I'm going to kidnap every noble's child so that they may know me and love me.
This isn't really in fairness.
I'm going to kill all those merchants.
This is not a defense. But you got to remember, Central American nobility was horribly inbred.
Oh, yes.
Like, people talk about European and make fun of the Habsburgs. No, they at least had branches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, he did a mixture of massive over-centralization.
It's not even over-centralization, because it's like...
He wanted to create
he wasn't actually in charge of anything. That's the weirdest fucking thing about all this, is that he didn't actually centralize any power on himself. He tried to centralize the army, but didn't really centralize the army, and it's a mess. He was a horrible ruler.
He just wanted to change for change's sakes, I think.
Almost. They talk about like other things where like the Spaniards come in, and to some degree these new diviners, because the last ones were obviously wrong,
and he killed them too. Killed. That's another thing. He keeps killing priests. Why is everyone rebelling against me? I'm killing more of you.
Why do the gods hate me?
He says as he murders a priest of Tlaloc.
And a lot of the people that are talking about them are saying like, these guys are bad news. And he's like, nah.
That's how Americans had family vines. No, they had family sticks.
Well, the nobility did. Again, this is why matchmaking was so important.
Because you didn't want to create Charles the Bewitched Mesoamerican edition.
Yeah, even more cursed.
Oh yeah, this is using the little Central American knowledge I have. Yeah, there was funny things done with archaeology of the nobility. they were actually physiologically different than the commoners because essentially because despite what you'd think, like all these assumptions of like warrior cultures. No, the nobles were actually a lot like the top nobles. They didn't do shit.
Well, they couldn't
Like
because
at
they were too
all, like, at all,
busy.
to such a degree that like archaeology has like some archaeology. I don't know if this has been discredited because it's from a book that was like 20 years ago, so it might have changed. But what I remember reading was essentially that like Aztec nobles' bodies and skulls were like smaller and weaker than the rest of the population.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're massively inbred, you'll reinforce specific traits.
Inbred and exercise and eat the best food. And
Well,
just
no. The exercise, it's again, repeat with bones. You would see signs of like them bending because of their weight.
It might also have been body shaping that was done
because
to
the
them
reason
as
the
infants.
Habsburg. Oh yeah, that's a thing. But the reason the Habsburgs, for example, had that jaw is because they kept marrying in. That trait kept sticking.
Yeah. Now,
so them being small, maybe into institutional like dwarfism or some type of short,
not like full dwarfism, but like they were like smaller, like not like dwarfs, but like if you like stood them side by side, you notice that one of them is at least a few inches shorter, and this was consistent.
Well, because you're reinforcing the same basic traits that all of the families had at this point.
Well, let's also not forget that Montezuma then tries to do like a gigantic flipperoonie. I think is the best way to put it. You know how we're all worshiping Quetzalcoatl? Let's go to Quetzalcoatl.
So, and the reason he did it was because Montezuma, when he met Cortez, believed I should entreat with him.
This is a descendant. Remember, they didn't think that they were Quetzalcoatl. They thought that they were descended from Quetzalcoatl because he was supposed to have gone to the east, which is
either the descendants or messengers from him.
Yes, either way, important. We need to at least listen to them.
So the high priest of the most important, because Huitzilopochtli, like Tlaloc is easily number 2, like very close.
Yeah.
But Huitzilopochtli for hundreds of years in Aztec culture and for dozens of years in the empire was their chief god, like legitimately the equivalent of Zeus.
Yes. So he's like, these guys need to fucking go. We need to get rid of these motherfucking white people. Like they are gonna bring nothing but trouble. We need to get rid of them.
Also, why is everyone coughing?
Yeah, like oh yeah.
They brought plague. They've brought plague, and we need to sacrifice them so that we can get rid of this disease.
It also I want to note the first fucking thing that the Spanish did when they got to the Great Temple in Tenochtitlan is they fucking put a cross on the top of it and threw off all the other idols. Like, yeah. Fucking Spaniards, man.
That's hilarious.
Well. Think about it, Tech. They were right, and these people were wrong. They had to show them they were wrong.
Yes, Spaniards.
So silly.
The last
that's
time.
Literally that's literally the mindset. Like devoid of any.
I know. But
we are right. They are wrong. We must show them how wrong they are.
It's sillier because I think it's sillier because not only did they do that, but they didn't expect it, like, no blowback. None at all. What happened is a civil war in the priesthood. Because a lot of the priesthood saw this shit happening and went, these motherfuckers need to go. They need to go right the fuck now. But the inner circle around Montezuma is buying into his Quetzalcoatl bullshit. And is in our... Yeah, because they have to or they're going to get fucking killed. So there's a minor civil war in the priesthood. Where...
Those of Huitzilopochtli were like, fuck this, while Quetzalcoatl...
Even the ones that Quetzalcoatl are like, this isn't what was supposed to happen. Like, this ain't right. This isn't what was supposed to happen at all.
But here's
These
the best part.
Need to go.
The Kingsmen were in the minority.
Yes. They were so in the minority that the king was put under house arrest on his own will to keep him from going out and about because he would have been fucking killed.
But it doesn't matter because he
got kidnapped.
Well, no, it doesn't matter because they elected a new king.
So the Spanish kidnap him basically willingly. It's not really a kidnapping. He's actually plenty happy to go and give
the Aztecs' response were
all the gold they want. The rest of the nobility, by the way, who've been empowered by Montezuma, suddenly realize this dude is fucking dumb.
Like, holy shit, even his dad on his death, before he let the masonry kill him, even when he was in the fit of his
Like-
syphilis insanity, he was still more with it than this guy.
Not only that, but they've been given all the power by him at this point.
And this asshole's
And
going to try to take
This
it away
asshole
by
is
letting
going
the
to try to
Spanish
take
do
it away. Now he's trying to give all the stuff that he was doing that he gave us to the Spanish.
Wonder what
Fuck
the
that.
Aztecs thought of the Christ story. Wait, you only need to sacrifice one guy to save
You
everyone?
only need to sacrifice one guy. Yeah.
Lame.
There's a fun alternate history story where it's like, so what if like the Aztec like the Spaniards got stuck there and like there weren't any more Spaniards, so they still managed to sort of take over. So it's like Jesus becomes a blood god.
I thought of
Like-
something really cursed now because of this.
The
Just a
Cortesian
change in
Empire.
a change in the Christian doctrine where the head of the church upon Easter
Has to be
crucifies
sacrificed.
themselves. No,
Oh my
crucifies
God.
themselves. So there's only a pope for a year.
This is sort of similar to what the Aztecs actually did. They had a person that they'd take and they'd ritually dress them up as.
I get the feeling. I for some reason though get the feeling that every year the Papal Conclave, it's going to be whoever wins is it's not going to be a popularity. It's going to be a popularity contest for all the wrong reasons.
But
Yeah.
here's the other cursed aspect I am thinking. The Papal Conclave is of the 12 cardinals, and the reason there's 12 apostles, and they're the ones that actually manage the body of Christ. Although it originally was supposed to be split between 3 in Rome, 3 in Antioch, 3 in Jerusalem, and 3 in Alexandria.
But those fake Romans are obviously wrong, so we took them all back.
So they split
Yeah.
and made their own. So this is just
So-
weird alternate what the hellery.
But yeah,
So-
the Cortez,
so then-
Cortez Conquistadors, the man who held an empire hostage and somehow
Fucked it all up. Now let's get into how he fucked it all up. So first off, Cortez is dealing with the fact that the Spanish government has figured out that he has gone completely off the
illegally.
rails.
Oh, yeah,
Because he was just
illegally.
supposed to
This
do.
is-
He was just supposed
this
to
is
start a
all-
trade deal with this fucking empire.
No, he was supposed to just check out what's on the continent. see
Oh, yeah,
what's
just
going
check
on,
it
trade
out.
some stuff.
Trade some
Like,
stuff. Teach
and
them
no-
Jesus a bit.
And not only that, but his was so fucking limited that like the governor of Cuba fucking hated him. First off,
Yeah.
but it's such a limited scope that he immediately tossed it out because he's like, I know these motherfuckers got gold. We're getting that
Yeah,
goddamn gold.
that was a problem with the Spanish. Well, the problem I guess technically it was a benefit because
So-
of how things turned out. But
Yeah. So
but the only
Cortez,
people who okay. I was saying the
Sorry.
only people who wanted to become conquistadors were essentially people not like nobles who wanted to bring noble people who wanted to bring God. They were people who had nothing and saw this as an opportunity to gain
Either had-
everything.
either had nothing or were like third or fourth sons who really just wanted everything.
Although this is
Yeah.
more because after Cortez, not during. Cortez.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying,
Okay.
people going into the New World in
Second time
general.
this happened, but okay.
Okay. So there's a lieutenant of Cortez who then decides it's a great idea. What if we get rid of this fucking nobility?
So he stages a fake festival.
Yeah, oh, there's a festival, guys. Hey, yeah, you got to come without any weapons or
This
anything.
is
'cause
our
it's all
culture's
peaceful and it's
festival.
great. And then he has them all fucking slaughtered. This, of course, makes people very
Full city
mad
riot.
because
Yeah.
not only on top of this, he doesn't get them all. He's incompetent enough to not get them all.
Despite having
They
guns
go in the city.
and
No, well,
allies.
I was gonna
Despite
say metal
having
armor,
allies,
metal swords.
metal armor,
Metal
swords is
armor,
just
metal
an
sword,
advantage, you think.
metal guns to Lex Colin allies.
It's more that they had all the allies around them. The Spanish themselves were pretty important and they were pretty tough to deal with, but they were definitely killable and they were killed during the fighting. The main thing is that they
I think
fought
one of
very
the biggest
disciplined.
shows of Cortez's failure was allowing a guy to design and build a catapult when they had no engineers.
yes, this was a priest, if I remember correctly, that tried to build a trebuchet and it kind of destroyed itself. It's really funny actually, because they knew that they'd run out of gunpowder eventually.
So yeah, Tenochtitlan obviously riots from surviving nobles because he couldn't fucking kill them all. And commoners
And-
are like, no, And the
no,
other
this
king
is
like,
all
no.
fucking bizarre. Like there's all this. So the fun bit about this is that the
Moctezuma
Cortez
is
gets
forced.
back. Cortez gets back from slaughtering another force of Spaniards that had come to arrest him because he's gone off the reservation.
I didn't
wanna
know
note
this
this.
part.
So there was a force from Cuba that came over to Mexico, and they were
Cortez,
wondering
you were
what the
supposed
fuck
to
is going
just
on.
scout out the coastlines and see what the big empire
So
they talk about is.
He goes and
Murder them all.
he ambushes them and burns their ships and basically says, "Well, you got a choice now. You can either join me or I'll fucking kill you all." And many
I'll
many
kill
of
you
them
all with
join
my
because
native
he brings
allies.
the gold. They join him because he also offers them a fuck ton of money.
Showing off
basically.
like the statues of Hugh Chipotle that they fucking stole from the
Yeah,
temple.
like all this gold. Look at all this. He's like, guys, look, they've got all this goddamn gold, and they are handing it out to us. We've got a good thing going on in their capital. We've got their emperor in our pocket.
And then they come
really
back and
into
why is everything
Jesus.
on fire? Why is
And it
everything
gets
on
back and
fire?
everything's on fucking fire.
But they
And-
still hold the city, sort of.
They still hold the city, sort of, at this point. So the Cortez goes and says to basically choose out his lieutenant for allowing this shit to happen, and then says, send the head of the
Send
the
their
forces
emperor out to tell them it's all okay.
Yeah, it's to tell them it's okay. Maybe that'll
And
they
throw
fucking
rocks
murder
at
the
him.
guy.
They rip him apart.
No, they don't
No,
kill
they
him.
throw-
They throw
throw
rocks at
rocks
him,
at
and he
him.
gets badly injured. And then he dies a few days later because he refused the
There's-
doctor.
Yes, and not only on top of that, there's rumors that the Spanish had him killed at this point because he's useless. He's fucking useless.
Which, yeah, I mean, I would. And
the-
vice versa. Like, maybe
By the
it
way,
was a Aztec
The
that killed him.
Spanish at this point still kind of control parts of the city because there's enough people in the city that are just like, we don't know what the fuck's happening.
Or
What is
afraid.
this? What is this?
So
By the way, it gets funnier because the rival king that the nobles and those that served Huchipotle,
no, the first
nominated.
because there's a second one.
yeah,
the first
but the
dies
first
of
one
smallpox.
dies.
Yeah, the first one dies of smallpox. The next one, basically, everybody's on the board after this guy because it's like at this point it's like these guys have been nothing but
Montezuma's
fucking
clearly
trouble.
dead. They're not talking about him anymore. This guy's dead. They're holding our city.
They need to fucking go.
So they pronounce it
So
Kautemok.
the Night of Sorrows. By the way, do you know why they call this the Night of Sorrows? And I love this. The Spanish call it the Night of Sorrows because they have to leave the gold behind. That's the only reason they call it that.
No,
Christ.
They have to leave
We
the
have
gold
to-
behind.
I for some reason get the feeling that these conquistadors were not followers of the seven virtues.
Yeah, they also have to leave. They're attacked. I think a few of them die, not a lot of them, but they have to flee. There's like the Aztecs chase them across the water in their boats. It's not a fun time for them. But again, the thing that they're really broken up with is we had to leave the gold behind. No.
Also,
Which is-
for Chronicles of Darkness reasons, they give you ideas like you can have Jaguar shifters attacking. You have mages kind of doing their
maybe
thing.
maybe a demon manifests itself and goes like,
because the
"Fuck
demon's
these
like
guys."
because the demon's looking at the conquistadors, fucking god machine.
God machinery. So now, on top of all this, right? They managed to get their allies back together, and
Well, no,
they
they're
start to
lucky.
siege the city again.
Well, they get lucky because the incidents here, they're trying to, because they already had connections with others. What really saved them were the Tlaxcalans, which were the strongest of the tributary states under the Mexica Triple
And they heard
Alliance.
you might have killed Montezuma. We're down with that.
Because Montezuma treated us like shit. You know how many of our fucking boys that he sacrificed to power the sun?
Yeah,
Because
like,
they were
we're
a
down
very,
with you.
very beloved target of Montezuma for that.
Yeah. So they're looking at.
So Cortez has a tribal army just led by like the surviving Spaniards.
and they tried to build a trebuchet. It doesn't work. They finally use the cannons. They managed to take the city and basically burn it to the fucking ground. By the way,
Mainly because they starve it to death due to water.
yeah. They then, of course, he takes this the captive brother king out on an expedition to like Honduras or something. And the guy never comes back. It's very obvious that that Cortez just kind of had him, killed. This also happened possibly to Cortez's wife, by the way. It's quite crazy.
I mean, he's going to be governor soon. He needs to.
They make him governor, and then he gets mad because he's not given enough slaves. Dead serious.
Mhm.
It doesn't go well, and the missionaries arrive, and this is when the because a lot of the books about this the religion get burned because it's obviously demon worship and all this, and then some of the priests realize, no, wait a second, wait, what the fuck are we doing? Like, we got to save this stuff for knowledge's sake, so we know what the heresies are, because the syncretism is already beginning, like the change of, like, oh yeah, the gods are saints is already happening. It's really weird. The next bit
Is the
is
supernatural
that,
bits.
yes, and also I want to note that this is about the time when one of these priests comes over and he realizes that this horrible, what are you doing to the natives? They have souls, god damn it. We should enslave the blacks instead.
Yes, but can we
And
get
then
to
he
the... Okay.
realizes that was a terrible mistake too. Anyway, on to the supernatural. That's the history lesson. We're now into woo-woo land.
We had to do the history lesson because holy shit.
It's crazy.
So there's a lot of strange stuff.
So crazy.
Skinchangers are one of them. And the most common iteration are the priests.
Yeah, fire priests or jaguar priests. They kind of all talk about the fact that, like, all priests look kind of fucking weird because they're covered in blood a lot of the time. They don't bathe very often, and they never bathe their hair if they can avoid it. They often will carry, like, gold or other things. They're very
often
scarred.
Covered in scars, cuts.
And
so an enterprising skinwalker, skin changer,
basically
can replace another priest pretty easily.
Yes,
because and on top of that, there's more than just the Aztec born skin changers. There's the Canaima, which are a specific type that haunt they're basically more spirit than man at that point.
Yeah, they're out in the desert. Now, they talk about, they give you some samples and all this and all that, but to give you an idea.
Actually, Iktaka is one of them.
Yeah, like a jaguar priest. So they talk a bit about, like, how the mages might have some influence in these priesthood, which, not a surprise. But they talk a bit about, like, how these the Eagle Warriors, this is where we're getting into, like, the other societies. Like, the Eagle Warriors are one of the two premier. The Eagle Warriors' big thing is that they have to they get the right to wear eagle feathers. They get the chance to study at the noble academies for, like, priests and noble sons because they're that honorable. They're there's only around 1,000 of them at any one time. They are
at least
the
until
most veteran of
veterans.
Them. Yes, they're the most veteran of veterans. They have to capture at least 10 enemy soldiers of worth, spend 13 days on campaign without getting caught, and bring down an eagle with an atlatl.
Which, that's pretty fucking hard. That's a throwing javelin.
And this is whether they are considered. Spear. This is to get considered.
See, 10 men of worth, they have to be at least noble.
Yeah.
13 days tracking an enemy movement. You have to stalk them for that long.
You have to show that you are resourceful, you are very good at doing what you do, and you've never been captured or even really noticed in some cases.
Eagle Warriors were their special forces. One of our chat members brought them up. These are probably what you're thinking of. And Moctezuma had them killed to a man because a lot of commoners were a part of them.
Yes, there's also the Shorin ones, which are a bit more like the actual special forces, where they're literally you need some really fucking crazy shit to join them, if I'm remembering correctly.
So the rites to join involve praying to Quetzalcoatl. You share blood with an eagle.
Yeah, the Shorin ones were possibly the most prestigious society. They were the ones that would shave half their heads. They had to take a lot of other things. They were more the shock troops.
They don't go into detail about the Shorin ones, so that's fine.
Yeah. The Eagle Warriors are a little bit different. The Eagle Warriors had more requirements, but the Shorin ones were thrown much more into, like, the front of the battle.
I like how you're talking about something that's not in this book at all. But
I know,
it's
but it's interesting. It's important to note. The Jaguar Warrior needs to capture at least 13 worthy enemies.
The Jaguar Warriors, if you're wondering, are the noble. They were primarily noble born.
Yeah. They usually say that it's, there's fewer of them than the Eagle Warriors, which not
Which
hugely surprising
they're
because of
trying
that.
to brag, but the reason why is because you have to capture 13 noble enemies or better, and perform at least 20 brave deeds at minimum.
And you have to kill a jaguar in hand-to-hand combat.
And that's the
The-
big thing.
Yeah, like that's pretty hardcore right off the bat.
It's doable because again, big cats are, that is doable. It's just I would actually still say the eagle warriors are harder. It's just because the jaguar warriors are more noble, they have to do everything bigger than the eagle
Yeah.
warriors, which do accept commoners in their ranks.
Yeah. Then
Jaguars do
there's
not.
also the Mystery Society. Then you get the woman priesthood, basically, where
Which may or may not be an actual thing. I'm going to
I'd have
lean
to look
towards
into this.
I'm going to lean towards it being legit because the Aztecs did have witch lore.
Yeah, they had quite a bit of witch lore.
So this is what they are.
Yeah. These are female wood midwives, and then
Yep. In this case, it's a breaking of social boundaries. It's a good way to, if a woman is not able to really focus on the home life or they're too troublesome, but you don't want to sacrifice them.
Yeah,
this
is
a
more
good
of like
venue.
a secret society. This I think is the fake stuff at the end, but it's definitely true that there were women that would get some kind of weird
Most often
standard.
matchmakers or midwives have that bending, but
Yeah.
if they can't quite manage that, you join the secret society, this Society of Witches, because Aztecs will consult them for a variety of deeds.
Yeah, I'm
you
gonna
can also
Google this
disguise
term.
yourself as a man.
Yeah, that wasn't unusual. This looks like it's almost entirely fake.
I kind of figured, because here's the thing: Heart of Hearts, some societies and time periods, if you really want to play a woman, you really fucking can't.
This is a way for you to do it.
This is an Onyx Path method to avoid that, and it's also a way for them to avoid accusations of sexism, even though it's not their fault. This culture had a very strict gender role society. The same thing, by the way, happened in a lot of native cultures. There are exceptions, like I think, what is it? The Zuni and the Navajo. They have a third one, but that's more of a, okay, you're clearly screwing up. You can't hunt as a man, so here, weave as a woman.
Yeah,
we don't care.
Yeah,
we don't want
we
you
don't
dead
care.
because we need your hands. Same with a
you're,
woman.
You're better at this than you are at this. Just do this.
That's where the third gender thing comes up. It's more of an excuse to not, because with a tribe small enough, you kind of need every hand.
Yeah, there's also third genders that kind of exist in a weird state where it's like you're ritually this. You're not actually this physically. You're ritually taking the place of a woman, which is weird. But there you go.
More for religious reasons though than actual any. Like, it's not an actual gender thing. That's a thing that
It's hard. The distinction is there, but it's hard to grok for some people.
And on top of that, it kind of feeds into the current issues on that. But we're not gonna go into that.
But basically,
that's too far in the weeds.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, this was perfectly made up, but it's plausible, so it's fine.
Yeah, human societies are fucking complicated, basically. And I would not be surprised if there were women that were living like men during this era.
I mean, one of the most common myths in medieval culture is that rather than that there's this disastrous pope who literally hailed Satan at one point.
Yeah, that's way later.
It's one of the Johns, I think. He was so terrible, he actually once screamed "Hail Satan" in church mass.
Yeah.
He also prayed to Zeus as he was dying after getting thrown out of a window.
Yeah, then of course that became Pope Joan, but
because honestly, it's more of a, honestly, it'd been better if he was a woman.
I thought that was just Protestant propaganda.
Sort of is, sort of isn't.
Also, it's because John was such a disastrous lech that he often I think at one point he had a habit of dressing his mistresses in priest robes.
Oh no, yeah. That's all real. No, that part's real and documented. I meant the female pope.
Well, yeah, it's based on John's flings with his mistresses, because more than once he has dressed them up in in cardinal regalia or something ridiculous like that.
It's one of those myths, but basically, like when
we're talking about, here's the creatures that bump in the night. The sun people. These are the primordial original god creations. Basically, they were screwed over purely because of the two brothers.
These are the giants. To join the Jaguar Warriors Secret Society of Shapeshifters, you might have to kill one.
Some few know that isn't true, when in reality you can kind of take or leave, but this is assuming if you want to, because who doesn't want giants?
Yeah. Like, at the same time, who doesn't want, like, weird, like, murder priestesses or whatever? Like, that's not the weirdest shit.
It's fine, and it makes sense because Aztecs did have witches.
They did have witches. So you can easily just say that this is maybe them trying to do witches without the connotations.
Witches, but yeah, with more variety, I should say.
Yeah,
Because again, Aztec society is really limited.
it is. It's a
So,
very strict and regulated
Giants
society.
live in the
It's hard-
caves. They eat the bugs, but they just want to eat bugs
They want to eat bugs and not be
and
eaten
live
by
in the
jaguars.
caves. Yeah, they're fine.
Then there's the monkeys of the second son who really fucking hate you.
But let's see. Any more details on the They're terrified of jaguars to the point where they'll flee on sight. They go into details about them too. So again, here's what they are. So if you want to, you could probably play one of these. Although why? How?
They have a weakness against jaguars. Against any jaguar, divide all their combat pools and their defense in half.
By all our power divided, we are a cat.
Also, here are the smoking jaguar mirrors. Basically, this is what
Fire
Tekatsu the
beasts.
Polka sent on them.
Yeah.
They hunt
Sure.
the remainders.
They hunt. Yeah. They also have pretty crazy dice pools. 12 dice pool bright pools and 11 for clawing you.
That's pretty
Jesus.
bad. It's almost as bad as the giant spear.
You're not getting out of that. They're at least rolling, even if you max out your defensive skills somehow, they're still rolling a couple of dice on you.
Well, yeah, these things are designed to kill the giants.
Yeah. Then
Here's the monkeys.
Then the monkeys who beset and kill vulnerable travelers, carve out a hollow in their body and walk around it in the inside.
Well, on top of that, here's some things that they did. This is actually them explaining because in Mesoamerica and also a lot of the New World, discovering of mining and metalworking has happened more than once.
Right.
It's just because of the lack of beast of burden and because lack of beast of burden, the knowledge doesn't spread, and by the time you have some details, the surface deposits go away. You don't have the manpower to start mining.
Or you have the manpower to start mining, and you do, but it's just more convenient not to, and these tools just aren't
honestly,
worth it.
stones, you can do as
Stone's
much
really
with stone.
useful. If you're not doing a huge amount of pottery with copper-rich soil, which these cultures really weren't, or you don't have a huge amount of surface copper to play around with, you're less likely to get into metalworking seriously. You're still going to do it occasionally,
Usually
but
for
it's less
decorative
important.
purposes.
It's just less important, and it's just like, well, everything else works fine.
I mean, to give you
as
an
is.
idea, the pyramids, the most metal used in it was in the copper saws they used to saw apart the limestone.
Yeah,
And even then, they didn't do most of the cutting work. It was actually the sand they poured into the crevice as they cut.
Yeah,
You do a lot with just pure stone or sand, like pounding stones. They basically replace hammers and do the same benefit. You just take a hard piece of granite and you just keep slapping.
But yep, this is a skin thief, and then they go into like the jaguars that go completely fucking crazy. And
of course, I am Zico
Jaguar
Tanakal. Who would I be but him? Don't I sound like him?
Yeah, that's the hollow monkey people, which I like.
It's pretty great. Basically, they're so angry that they've become monkey.
Yeah, well, more accurately, the monkey grabbed them and hollowed them out in his
And
wearing them like a fucking puppet.
It's the Edgar suit from
Yeah.
Men in Black.
Yeah, they speak the language of the gods, which of course is Aztec. So there's no language barrier whatsoever, even if they're a monkey, which is kind of funny.
Now he is slovenly. His clones are torn and filthy. He clearly hasn't washed any smells.
You know what this reminds me of too? The Strix. This sounds a lot like the Strix. Anyway,
He forgot about them. Yep.
Yeah.
There's the Jaguar outcasts.
Basically just, oh no, Jaguar people, rock.
Basically, they failed the right to become Jaguar warriors, and they got so mad they became Shapers.
Yeah, then there's Mother Magui.
Magui or agave is one of the most important plants in the Aztec world after maize and beans. It provides food, fibers for paper and clothing, and a sweet sap that fermentates into pulque, which, pulque is a traditional
They're-
alcoholic beverage. It is, from what I understand, fucking disgusting,
well, I mean, it gets you drunk, so
but it works.
yeah, like
Because it's just fermented pulp.
yeah.
I could be wrong.
Then-
I've never had pulque. I think it's like milkish.
This one, though, is a very rare one. It mimics the appearance of nearby varieties, and it has long leaves with sharp ends and smiting edges. But it injects a toxin,
Yep.
and it can spread.
Disciplinary tools.
It becomes infected
Toxicity
with
5.
spores. Yeah, that's not good.
No damage, but you're woozy. It forces another check each hour, but decreases in each time until it hits 0 until it dissipates. A living mother maguey spine can spread the toxin to as many teachers as it punctures. Recently dead can infect 5. If you fail 3 checks, become infected with spores.
Over the next week, you develop a great thirst for water and desire for sunlight.
Oh no!
Feel compelled to stand in terrain ideal for Magway. You gain the obsession condition for pursuing this. After 1 to 2 weeks of this, you enter the second stage. Your digits grow slightly green and develop spines, and you can start infecting other people. The treatment is to muddle 2 toxic plants in the blood of a swallow, mix it with a powdered stone followed in the swallow's stomach, and feed it to the afflicted, and then bleed their fingers. This can cure you, along with the heart of a deer mixed with gold and certain other rare plants. The cure itself is not expensive, but it's required quickly if you need to recover quickly. And so it's really only feasible for the wealthy. But usually if you're less well off, they'll honor you to save you for the gods by sacrificing you.
Because it's better than what happens.
Oh boy, it's better than what happens. At stage 2, you start to want to water the ground you've selected in stage 3. You start to want to water the ground around you. For, beasts, it's just kill everything around you of their own species and water the ground with their blood. For humans,
it can be irrigating, but murder is also common too.
You could also, once the land is watered, the victim sits down and plants their roots. They begin to sprout the blade-like leaves common to the magpie and transition to the stationary phase, where their flesh ceases to receive nourishment and slows away. Their skeleton will remain there and often act as a lure for animals. And their heart is a very particular color. There's some rituals perhaps involved in eating these. Yeah.
This is actually horrifying. I love it.
The next one is even worse.
They put a lot of effort in these.
It read like one of those weird. I don't even know how to describe. It just reads like something you find in like some person's like a nightmare dream on DeviantArt journal or something.
Oh well,
like
it's based on. No, it's similar to. I don't know when this was written. I think it was written before they did the. Remember that vampire book we did with that one parasite?
Yeah.
It reminds me of that.
After that. It's similar, where this is just the life cycle of a really fucked up plant.
Could also be based on when was this written? 2014.
Yeah, I think so.
Last of Us, possibly.
Maybe, but that's a stretch.
I mean, cordyceps is a thing, and cordyceps is a thing written before.
Yeah.
So
but the next one's really.
It's a form of liana, which I don't know, but they look like normal vines, and they actually can be sources of water. You make an inception and sap some of the water. Self-vine also drips from various points. But drinking from it is dangerous, but not fatal, necessarily.
Yeah, like it's, it makes you want to sleep. Sleeping in contact with the vine exposes the victim to the true danger. The vine absorbs part of them.
Part of their
including
soul?
Part of their soul. And depending on the age and the size of the subject.
Roll from 5 to 10 dice depending on it. Contested by your resolve and tolerance, which, if you're immortal, you don't have.
And it will replace your mind with another mind.
Most victims are animals, so there's a high odds of you just becoming a jaguar, or a bird, or a chipmunk. So, yeah, you run around with an animal mind, with the human self implanted in the next animal. When a group of animals all fall prey to the same self-vine at once, one ends with an animal mind, the rest end up in each other's head.
Yeah. Yeah,
Whenever
as I
the vine
said.
takes some sustenance from the identity it retains. This one's interesting. It's horrifying, but in its own way.
Yeah, it's like, oh Jesus, you can do some real body horror with this one.
Well, here's another thing though. I'm just envisioning like a low-level mage having a few self vines, right? And here's why.
Yeah.
He sells their sap as a sleep aid because it makes you drowsy. So it's like you have troubles, huh? Well, here it is. It is sap from a vine that I have found that makes you sleepy. Come on, can't you
Yeah.
see people farming this thing? And just as long as you're not dumb enough to be right next to it and drink it, you're fine. Because it's when you drink from it that's the problem. It's parasitic aloe plant. Oh yeah, that's another horrifying version of sacrifice you could definitely do with the Mother Mage. Just, instead
Yeah.
of sacrificing them to the sun, you just make fields of them.
Yeah, but yeah, Huey Principality, they're talking about like the infrastructure here. And
Oh, the
you've got to
Dumpante
understand
is the
that,
skull rack. Basically, it's where they put
yeah,
all their dead, sacrifices.
approximately 60,000 skulls at maximum capacity. That's probably an overstatement. It was probably closer to about 8,000.
Still
a lot of
impressive.
fucking, still a fucking lot of skulls. They mentioned though that like these skull racks get arranged in a certain way where everything is stripped out except for the brains, where these weird scorpions crawl inside of them and take the mines
Well, I mean,
and provide covers.
the actual Zumpantli is an actual skull rack. It's a sacrificial kind of decoration.
Yeah, they're
And to
just talking
them.
about a way to
Remember
make this, make this infrastructure, which I think is really cool.
And this is how they do it. There are occult patterns in the wood itself because it's a wood frame, and you design etches into them in 3 dimensions. Then you add in small amounts of liquid silver to the sand that you inlay into it. After that, you anoint each piece of wood with a bit of blood from someone suffering from scorpion bites.
Yep.
Stings. And after that, you then assemble the skulls, and if you do it right, you can see a pattern and get an insight from it.
Yeah.
This is a logistical one.
Yeah, it's a neat one, honestly. Security: the entire Aztec priesthood backed by warrior societies, because they this is literally a religious site. That's kind of neat.
Yeah, and
However, throwing a handful full of skulls out of pattern breaks things. Kill the scorpions, so that can also break it as well.
Oh, here's a neat thing. The reason they have the scorpions nearby and they do the blood is to draw them there, but the brains inside augments the scorpions and animals into animera.
There you go.
Basically, you know that moon goddess lady?
Yeah, that's part of that.
Basically, in this case, these ones actually give details on how to make angels' covers better.
Yeah,
because
then
they
go
spy
into
people.
like the chamber within the Pyramid of the Sun.
Thoughtful scorpions. They go into details about that too.
Yeah, they do. They did a lot of effort on making infrastructure that could work in this setting. Honestly,
this is a winner because I never. You don't think too hard about how infrastructure sometimes works. Sometimes.
Yeah.
And this is the challenge of I don't even really have anything but surface copper.
Yeah. It's like how do I make this? So they go into
the Teotihuacan chamber. This is another
which is
one.
a teleporter.
Yeah, and it leads to the Pyramid of the Sun.
Depending on the words spoken, the traveler might be sent into Africa, Europe, or Asia in a different room with different code words.
But here's how it works. It's a
traps.
ceiling made of crystal in a sphere, and there's a pool of mercury underneath that ripples.
Yeah.
And then at 13 points, a skull is embedded in the wall, and grass is interlinked between them.
The grass is like circuitry. Think about it like that.
And this purpose is God Machine. It allows the God Machine to teleport assets.
Yeah. Again, it's really cool, but it's gone. The security that was around it is gone, and now it's just the secrecy. Now, that being said, there's like so many ways that this infrastructure can break.
There's a wooden pipe. I mean, it breaks, but for the most part, it's fine. There's just one pipe, though.
Yeah, I do like the talking about the
Continent 2 Facility 995. A dozen or so giants live in secrecy, surviving off of hunting. And there's a metal door behind
Concealed
them.
by concealment infrastructure. And then there's
Glass
like bundles
gears
of
from
wires.
gust of steam, bundles of wire, various metals from copper and gold to even ivy and human umbilical cord. That's a thing I like, and I remember really enjoying it when we covered the rebuilding of Istanbul, of the city.
Yes.
Is they go into detail because I never seriously thought about infrastructure because I've never gotten a demon game going. And I just love how you can just, you basically just, it's almost like Dwarf Fortress where you just pick random ingredients. Like,
there's a lot you can do with infrastructure. I like that they mentioned like that there's a bunch of animals in these jars, and then these keratin arms just keep them like basically arms made out of fingernails. Feed
fingernails
these
and
little
insect carcasses.
Yeah, feed all these like small subjects, and mixes and matches various creatures into like abominations and all that. That's really neat.
And there's an angel that actually kind of oversees it too.
And they give you an idea of what the angel is like. Then they give another a person who is put inside one of these jars, and now he has like all of these like fucking abominable like things. Like if you want to make a deviant, here's a deviant.
This is the captor, the angel that watches over this facility.
And then Patali, altered facility subject. I want to listen to what happened to this guy. He spent 3 years in that cage, surrounded by strange arms of tusk-like material that poked and prodded and cut and sewed, made him scream and kept him from dying. He thought he was in the underworld where people were being flayed. He couldn't complete the journey, and then one day he found himself free. The reason why? His fingers have little mosquito proboscises in them. His skin's been replaced by armadillo hide. He's got wings.
That sounds like a changeling if I've ever heard one.
Strung together wings, by the way.
Yeah, made of little bits of insect, like all stitched
I
together.
don't know. This sounds more like the animal chimera deviant.
Yeah, as I said, this is a deviant. This isn't a changeling. This is a deviant.
Oh, because we implied this was a person once upon a time.
He is. The deviants still are people. This is what the God Machine can do to you.
Greg, there's a big difference though. The God Machine isn't a fairy thing.
Yeah.
To be a changeling, you have to be infused with the energies and mystical soul voodoo of Arcadia. This doesn't have that.
Where the fairies
live. I still don't know deviants as well as you two.
Well, no, changelings all.
Changeling's very different.
The changeling is defined as a person who is kidnapped by the eldritch abominations called Fae, and
somehow
their essence is corrupted.
I know that,
fucking crazy.
But this just sounded like some weird face.
Well, this is something that that you might see in Arcadia.
Yeah,
that's why it was like those weird specific tortures. Like those, I was just talking about those weird specific tortures.
I mean, if you want to make the facility, if you want to make this facility like a little hidey hole for fairies to just do stuff like that, you can totally
a realm
do
of Arcadia. It works.
Like this guy can totally be a changeling. It's fine. But he's wandering the jungle. He wants to return to life that circumstances stole from him, but he can never truly return. He's become a hunter. He avoids them.
I wanna note this right here. The only part of him that still looks human
is his
face. It's the unassuming face of a Mesoamerican farmer. One sees, however, centuries of agony in his eyes. Stepping back, he's a monstrosity, thick gray hide making pauldrons in his shoulders and covering the rest of his chest, arms, and legs. His hands seem to have a fuzz on the end, which are the maws of mosquitoes.
You know, the funniest thing is he sounds like the Rhino from Marvel.
I know, right?
I've been trapped in my soup. Help me, Peter.
Yeah. Then they go into like obsidian mosquitoes, which are kind of like a little Orchitopsis and all this. And
this could be a God Machine thing, or it just could be something weird.
A cryptid, you know, like something weird. Then they talk about like the various agencies that would be around in inside of here, where they're talking also about various
Can you explain to Greg what agencies are?
Agencies are like collections of demons that get together. This is like your general group. Like an agency
compare
is essentially
coterie, pack.
I'd say more like covenant.
Covenant. Yep. Okay, so Covenant. So that's like the Carthian compared to Carthian, compared to Invictus, compared to Circle of Crone, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. This is a group of demons that are hiding out in the divination priesthood.
Yep, those who cure the tonali.
Yeah. They have a bunch of stigmatics. They have an example of a cover and a bunch of different people that are priests and their various covers and all that.
The main
It's
one is Chippewa, which runs it.
Yes, and then we get into the really weird shit, which is the things that just don't work the way they're supposed to. And there may be God Machine, there may not be. Like
So
the rain
we're
trees.
skipping Chippewa or Miss Pristine.
Yeah,
so here we go.
we'll let somebody else go through that because we're hitting pretty long here. So
About 2.5 hours. We're good. So rain trees. These are groves of trees that essentially the trees does the opposite. Rain
it
pours
takes
out
the
of the tree.
rainfall from them. Yeah, they manage this logically. The rain falls from the trees, so obviously their irrigation comes here. They use the water they get, and they kind of go like, it's okay. But then there's
a couple
really
other weird things
shit
like
around
umbrellas that they don't know what it is.
Stone carved models of various sea vessels. So you might have like the Bismarck here. A perfect model of the Bismarck just suddenly randomly appears in the Mesoamerican village in the 1500s.
Or just water. Literally the word water.
The water on a jade plaque, including several not spoken or written.
So this
or
is
ever
just some
spoken or
weird
written.
shit you can include here, and I love it. And you can make up
Then
your own. This gives you ideas for your own.
Then there's the thief fish.
Which is an
This
active
is-
volcano.
It's around an active volcano. Anyone who passes about 10 miles or so, there's a thief fish. It's a bright red and blue fish about as large as a man that floats 4 feet off the ground. It can speak Nahuatl fluently as well as other languages. Beyond
But
these
it
peculiarities,
looks like a normal fish.
it looks like a normal fish, but it steals from you.
Natives of the area are exempt.
Yeah, I love this thing. This thing's great. It's literally a bandit fish.
You have to give everything, though.
All your valuables, your money, or your life.
As the fish explains, being killed by him does not get one entrance to the heaven of Talalakan, or the heaven of the sun. You just get sent to Mictlan.
Yeah, so the thief
Which is
fish
the worst.
Have...
Basically, Mictlan is the worst underworld because
Mictlan is just boring.
Well,
It's
not only
awful.
boring, but you stop existing eventually.
Yeah.
It's the Aztec way of trying to force people to be sacrificed, essentially.
Yeah. Then
There's
you get the
Lost Valley.
Dinosaurs!
Dinosaurs!
Yes.
Sounds straight out of SCP.
Yes!
Well, yeah, the thing is, Chronicles of Darkness has like some SCP tier shit, if you really think about it.
Like, that's kind of the fun of the thief fish. The thief fish is just, like, what the fuck? How do they transport things without hands? Nobody knows. Don't think about it. They'd even mention that. Don't think about it.
So the Lost Valley has dinosaurs.
There's an eagle warrior that found it, and then he's like, "Holy fucking shit, guys! There's fucking dinosaurs." Well, he doesn't know what they are, but there's these fucking weird.
There's weird monster things.
Then there's warriors from a distant land who are Japanese samurai that got transported to this place.
So, a band of samurai warriors and the soldiers under their command marched through a thick fog to take the fortress of Hatakeyama Yoshinari. They never found the entrance to the fortress. Instead, they found. So you can. So if you want to, in a glorious, amazing fight, you could have a jaguar warrior fucking 1v1 a samurai in a duel to the death.
As I've said, this is really cool.
This might be the winner out of all the ones we've covered. Like, let me show it off.
The thief fish is fantastic, but like the water people are also pretty good. I love the thief fish because it's just so weird.
I'm showing. So the Sundered World, Grug Mage is fun. To the Strongest, disappointing. Three Kingdoms of Darkness, very much potential, very good. Wolf and the Raven, disappointing for the topic subject. After the Fall's good. No, I think Beneath the Skin's the winner. Like,
so far for you.
So far. This is so insane.
Yeah. So they go into the water people. I like the water people. They live and watch the surface dwellers, the amusement. They farm the lake bottom and live in small caves and shelters they carve into the underwater of the lake. They breathe the salt water. They craft tools. And if you see them, they look like children except for the blue tinge of their skin and the webbing of their fingers.
Wait a minute. Are these the race of inbred cannibal monsters from the Animorphs book at number 36?
I don't know.
Because they do find Atlantis actually in Animorphs.
Oh my god, you're right. These are mermen. They've got little mermen here. That's actually fun too.
But the
chamber.
thing is, the Animorphs version are also vaguely Aztec inspired. They became weird monsters. Like they skin people and try to steal their genetic data to keep themselves going because of their horrible inbred. I think they're called the Nartek. So anyway, the refit chamber. This is another weird thing.
Well, you get some weirder shit too. Like,
so a removable piece of floor and the steam bath opens up a chamber of metal gears. They don't know what it is. And it was a reforging facility. Basically, this was where they dumped broken angels.
The family that's there is like, we don't know what the fuck this is, but we're kind enough to let you in. But once someone opens the chamber, they're like, they don't recognize you anymore because of how the infrastructure works. So inside of it, you can step inside, and it will invisible hands disassemble whatever the creatures inside it and reassemble it with whatever parts they can find. An hour later, someone or something will probably differently use the chamber. A chief for a small world maybe will influence the process. So if you want to become an Iron Man, this is how you do it.
If you want to become like one of the horrible zombie cyborgs from Virus.
Yeah. It can only handle one occupant at a time. We don't want to talk
about. Wait
a
minute. This is SCP-914 if you think about it.
This probably came before that.
Nope. 914 is one of the SCPs. You dirty motherfuckers. That's fine. I'm okay with it because it's still functionally different because it's just pure random what you become. You might for all you know, you just might be replaced with like random human skin bits that they have. So you're just like a patchwork man.
It's also talking about how it can alter a demon's cover, which is what the primary use of it is.
I'm just envisioning some weirdo though, like choosing I must become one, and he enters it and he leaves as like part gerbil.
I love the next one. The next one is really weird.
Mississauga.
All right. In November 10th, 1979, a train carrying dangerous compounds derails while passing Mississauga, Ontario. Certain compounds explode, a detonation visible from over 60 miles away. Because of the threat of chlorine gas, the authorities evacuate most of the city, dislocating about 200,000 people for about 6 days.
Which is an actual disaster, by the way.
Yes. Conspiracy theorists insist the citywide evacuation must have been a cover-up for something. An alien incursion, secret government experiment, outbreak of supernatural creatures, something altogether. Theorists insist the authorities remove them to prevent them from seeing the secret or to adjust their memories after the accidental exposure. The derailment and chemical spills naturally never happened, of course, according to them. The derailment is true and can be verified after decades creating out their small patches that will never quite be clean. Tests can show the presence of chemicals and trace amounts that match the official history. In truth, the evacuation never happened because the people were already gone, and the deliberate chemical spill helped cover up the fact the government just didn't know where they had gone on November 8th, 1979. Through some unorthodox sleuthing and a few consultants that the government never put on their own books, everyone from Mississauga was back in their own bed by the evening of November 16th. They spent a week in Aztec-era Mexico.
And then they came back.
They appeared in the town of Tezcatlan within the Valley of Mexico, but not close to town of Cheatland, over the course of several hours, appearing out of the darkness of night as though they had walked a long distance. Bewildered by the journey and unable to communicate with their new hosts, it was a difficult time for the travelers. The locals treated them as visitors from the land of the gods, at least at first. Because, I mean, you would too. Like, suddenly all these weird people show up.
Weird clothes. They look completely different from you.
Yeah.
And they speak a language you've never heard of before.
Yeah. And you know what? That's a fun one. Because you could run a demon game around, you are the ones that have to fix this. Or a mage game. Where you can do some time travel with that.
Yeah, well, it turns out that one of your peers or one of your fallen peers did this, and you're the ones assigned to fucking fix it.
Well, yeah. That's just me. What if you're a demon from the Aztecs and you have to deal with the time travelers? As in you're from the past and you have to deal with time travelers from the future.
Because you are kind of aware. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're also not aware, and the GM essentially fucks with you because you don't know is this a God machine plot or is this actually just weird
shit.
So
But
here's
it
some.
could be a God Machine plot, which means it could be able to get you.
Speaking of
know.
which, here's some other ones. The shamed Tepactli, which is another structure. It's a flint
Yeah.
knife, and the way it works is, he posed as a priest. This
Yeah.
man posed as a priest.
And then the spirit stayed in the knife.
And yeah, the man's soul went into the knife.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. It gives you bonuses, and if it's broken, it will release a spirit. Neat little artifact. You can put this in basically any game you want.
Nikali's spirit's still in the knife because Nikali was a great warrior that was captured in the Flower War, and he wants to take vengeance on Olin's line.
And if you hold the knife, you also do.
And you might be perfectly
Hundreds
possessed.
of thousands of people, you want to kill them now.
There's the Atlocatl, which is another canoe.
A fun canoe. It's a miraculously well-preserved canoe that whenever it makes landfall, it breaks up into hundreds of thousands of spiders.
And they're your friends.
They are your friends. They'll attack your enemies, and when you step in a body of water big enough for the canoe, the spiders will rush in and put them on for you.
I
again.
love this insanity.
This is like something like a magical item you'd find in like a really weird fantasy game.
I think that might be why I like this, because honestly, you could just take this as a Dungeons and Dragons style game.
It would be. It'd be a terrifying thing. It's like, oh yeah, this is like Loth's boat or something like that. Like Loth lost a bet and had to make a boat for someone. Well, the boat's obviously made of spiders.
The spiders serve you.
The spiders serve you.
Or my favorite is the race of angry monkeys who are cursed by the gods to stay that way, and they hollow you out and wear you as a fucking suit.
Yeah, I know, right?
This is easily my favorite of the books.
So they now go into like, okay,
just
so
playing
if you
the
want
game.
to play
Here you
in
go.
this Demons Mesoamerica, because it took us almost 2 hours to get to the actual crunch, which just gives you an idea of how good this is.
Well, also how because not a lot of people
dense
know
this
about
is.
Mesoamerican stuff is.
I mean, how many pages have we gotten through? We've gone through about 30 pages.
We're almost done. Don't
worry. We're a little under. It's almost over. Don't worry.
So basically, how demons work is, in a small world like this, it's easier and harder to be disguised, because if your cover gets shaky, it's just as simple as go to another city-state.
Yeah.
It's a good way, like if your cover starts experiencing glitches, you can just casually go to another city and build a new one.
You can gain some tolerance, and as long as you're pretending to be the right kind of people, you're fine. But you're not going to be trusted.
And that is an issue. You have to try to slowly build a better...
So you're
Screams and Arachnophobia. I love that boat. I think I might introduce it as an artifact somewhere one of these days.
It's such a good boat. It is such a good boat.
I'm just envisioning like some dumb adventurers like going into an ancient temple, and they find a boat by the side, they grab it, and it just disintegrates into a swarm of spiders that then follow them loyally to the death.
And now they explain how a contract works when you don't have literate people.
So yeah, but here's some ranged weapons just in case. Pacts. These are important.
Yes. So demons, of course, make contracts with people. Usually, you can forge contacts with people with Reed, and you just invite the sucker to put the mark on the line. Easy enough. There's a few points in the world where dominant language doesn't have really a written form, but you can just produce the contract in a written language nearby, explain it all. They'll sign it. Sometimes you can deliver the pact in a foreign language just for an advantage over the mortal.
Although that doesn't work anymore too often.
Yeah, because people obviously realize that this looks bullshit.
So the thing is, in pre-literature, they use a proto-language on pictograms, ideograms, and other symbols.
Rebuses. It requires a certain amount of interpretation, and the only Aztecs can really read are priests, nobility, and artists.
And that's about
Writing out a pact would be equivalent to writing out a modern contract like it would be a novel.
Not only that, but it'd be the equivalent of... It would be the equivalent of writing... I think nowadays it'd be like the equivalent of writing...
Poetry?
No, it'd be the equivalent of writing it purely in octal. Or some computer coding language. Like C#.
Yeah.
C# or no. What's that one? What's the guts that Chris Sawyer used to make Roller Coaster? Batch coding. It'd be like making your entire contract in batch code. and expecting everyone to be able to read it.
That's horrifying.
Some people can, but not a lot. It just looks like numbers. So yeah, a commoner would have no frickin' clue what that would be. And honestly, nobles would be confused because they don't have paper. Not really.
Yeah.
They have agave pulp fiber, and they use, I think, linens to make their codices.
Yeah. They then go into like how a soul pact would work in this case. So a commoner doesn't know what paper is. They couldn't really read it very well. So they can make their mark, but it's going to look weird, and you need to look at it in a different way.
So instead, they do bartering.
They barter. They tell you what, like, okay, so you want this. Then they mark a stone or something with a symbol, right? It might be something abstract. It might be something of the terms. But the point is that it's a mark. It's something that works. So you put a trace of the blood on the mark, and boom, you're done.
And this actually kind of gives me ideas for if you did this with the Inca instead.
Yeah,
you would be able to string together
the
quipu.
chords.
Yeah, you could do quipu.
Of
And
course,
the Aztecs do have stuff like this, though, where you just mark.
So you could still use language from another place to make a thing like any living language. A demon automatically knows it. So you could use Greek to make a very precise contract, and then explain it to them what it is, what these markings mean. Not necessarily in Nahuatl because it doesn't have a written language. So because you can't write a written language that doesn't exist. So
well, no, you explain the Greek. You explain the Greek in Nahuatl.
It's the same way as using an English contract in Poland right now would be like. It's like, what the fuck are you doing?
Which is suspicious. Right. So a smarter thing, again, this is why they make it a point. You just draw pictures, or you etch things, or you use stones or something.
Where modern demons prefer to have a very legalese document because people are used to that. Here, you'd be doing something completely different.
You'd barter like a good one. Here's what I'm envisioning, because scales have been a thing everywhere, and I know the Aztecs had their own version of weighing scales.
Yeah,
you produce a weighing scale, and you produce a variety of stones of different types.
Stones with marks on them.
Stones with marks that are differently weighted. And you just go, so what exactly do you wish? And you could be like, I wish that I myself could be promoted beyond where I am, to become the warrior noble.
A symbol of a noble, or a
warrior noble,
club, or whatever.
On there, a picture of family safety, and like one more thing, and I don't know, and like the potential for my kid to become a priest when I become a noble. So you put those three, the demon weighs it down, and he puts his marks here on the other scale until they balance out. And the demon can kind of cheat it a bit by making the stones weigh differently as they're putting it on. So, because the weight is kind of based on what you want. Like, this is what I'm envisioning in my head. And I think that actually kind of that kind of works, I think. For me, it might not work for you, the viewers, or I don't know if I lost you, Tech.
Yeah, I get what you're talking about. Sorry, there was somebody that sent me something. Now we're getting into like the actual like.
Here's the Aztec weapons, details about them. Here's merits that you can have. Here are the new fighting merits.
Yeah, and then they add a couple of new merits, and then they talk about how to change. Skin Thief is one. Skin Thief is where they're like, so as a template, we can't really write that up here. We don't have the page count because this is pretty complex. So here's a merit version of it so that it can use to make it a little bit more flexible.
And this is how you can disguise yourself. And it's pretty much, particularly educated humans can do it, but it's more of a thing spirits and monsters do.
Yes, and then they talk about how like other things work, and then the more dots you have, the more you get out of it. So like you can have theoretically infinite dots in this merit to give you more things, and then like, for example, shapeshifting might render you naked as a skin changer because you're not as spiritually in tune as a werewolf, where werewolves' clothes will change with them.
So here's some details also with Skin Thief, because they cost willpower to actually firm up.
Yes.
A one-shot skin will last for a day or a night, and it does not cost willpower. Week-longs give you some time. Month-longs are what the monkey people do, but effectively they spend 2 willpower each time. And then there's the year-long skins, which are based on a specific thing before they start falling apart. And also, you need to give up willpower to make something permanent. And it just gives details. Here's animal speech, bare necessities.
Yeah.
Essence hybrid form.
Hybrid form is when the way you do it. Renewable skins is actually kind of interesting, where it allows you to just simply reuse a skin. It's kind of useful if you're looking more at like using, say, a week-long skin or a month-long skin.
Which is probably what that monkey guy disguised as the merchant's doing.
Yes. Then there's like quick changes where you can quickly take on or off. You can speak. There's one for speaking in the human tongue while in your animal form.
Yeah, twisted
and
tongue.
one where your natural form doesn't share the wounds taken in your animal form.
Which is very useful if you want to disguise yourself.
However, the problem is that
you don't heal.
Yeah, you can also take this multiple times for different animals, but the problem is that the big drawback for all this is that when in a form granted by this merit, a character doesn't confront their breaking points. Everything is surreal and filtered through a different perception, different instinct, so nothing feels world-shakingly wrong. But when you return to human form, everything comes crashing home. And it's worse. So if you do fucked up shit as an animal, or as a skin thief, you're going to go crazier much faster. Basically, your morality and everything else is going to break you much quicker. Your integrity is going to go down very quickly if you're doing fucked up shit as an animal.
And here are the social merits, because in Aztec society, here are some very important ones, like the Jaguar Priest, which, again, this only works if you're a noble, but here's how far along each one does.
Yeah, these are mystery cults, basically. So a mystery cult is a merit you can take, which allows you access to
and
a mystery cult.
Potli. By the way, 5 rank is usually head priest. So
5 rank is either head priest or like among the upper echelon. 1 is you're a novice. So as you do more, you gain more things, and usually by .3 you gain something actually supernatural. The more it goes, the more you might get. So you can get some.
Also, a fun thing is Huichipotli seems to be a god machine element, because look at rank 3.
Yes.
Or maybe he is a demon. You could make him a demon, either or.
Or this is a god machine cult that is just taking over, that is using the priesthood for their own benefit, which sounds like the god machine.
Also, the Jaguar priests can eventually become skin thieves, so yeah.
Yes, they do. It's a mystery cult because of that reason.
So here are some inspirations. They use the Handbook to Life in the Aztec World. Very good.
Aztec Herbal Codex.
That one's also extremely useful.
Then they go into
Here's what the other guys are doing.
So the managers of the Aztec Empire have risen to hit high stations that access local mysteries. Their enemies beyond the Empire's borders covet them and fight to protect their own from invading mages. So as Cortez is going on, it's kind of getting weird here, and nobody knows how much influence mages might have had in that. Sin Eaters are interesting as well, because a lot of them are working with sacrificial victims and banishing ghosts from victims that stick around and don't really want to die in a horrible way. What a surprise.
Yeah, Sin Eaters have been basically recruited to banish ghosts, even if they're not necessarily hostile.
Yeah. The irony of their mission is not lost to them. And ones that do not serve the priesthood are often basically heretics. Werewolves are hunted down because they're kind of dangerous.
They're dangerous, and on top of that,
they could wreck the priesthood. So the skin thieves are not very want them around. Vampires are everywhere, obviously,
because of all the freaking blood.
Now the problem is that this is not exactly what you'd call good to have around for vampires, and they're starting to try to infiltrate the priesthood. This could go badly. You could run this in many different ways with that.
Especially since they are opposed to the sun because of how badly they get screwed.
Yeah, the changelings have a couple of different courts, very small communities. There's not a lot of very formal courts around, but the ones that are usually directional.
Mainly because Arcadia is not strongly, it's not thin, it's the barrier's thick.
Very few of the victims escape the gentry, is the other thing to remember. There's the monsters, of course. There's
Yeah, because of the
A lot
God
of
Machine
hunters.
plots, there's a lot of weird chimeras running around, so there are hunters
Yeah.
that take them out.
and then there's some beasts. They have to mention them.
Beasts mentioned but ignored, and
Ignored.
Prometheans, they
Literally
sort of exist.
less lines than the Prometheans, by the way. I love that. Mummies are almost unknown until an arisen cult penetrated the labyrinthine infrastructure leading from the Great Zimbabwe to Tenochtitlan.
They actually. Oh yeah,
Yes.
they actually have a Chronicles book about this too.
Yes, they do. This is in they mention Mutapa in the companion book.
Yeah, this is it. This is where the mummies come from here.
Yes, so I think that's kind of clever.
So yeah, mages are kind of fighting with each other, especially since they're aware of the Spaniards to a degree. Sin Eaters are in a job that kind of opposes what they do.
They're part of the priesthood, but also not part of the priesthood. Depends on what you're believing.
Because the thing is, they avoided death, but death is a reward, especially if you're being sacrificed like this. And quite a few of them probably have spirits that refuse to move on to sun heaven. It's weird. Werewolves are hunted because they frickin' hate skin thieves. Vampires are trying their trick, but the problem is, you can't really be a good priest if you're not out in the sun. Changelings don't matter. Hunters are very important because of all the chimeras. Just summing it up.
All the fucking monsters, yeah.
Beasts, no, they don't. Who cares?
Who cares? Literally, who cares?
You can have a few Prometheans around. They'd probably, I would say, mostly be either Olgans or Osirans.
Yeah, not a lot of them. They're kind of fucked. And then there's mummies who might have
who literally were Kangs because they teleported from Mutapa.
Yeah, that's fun because they mentioned because remember they mentioned the that infrastructure with the teleporter. With
That's
the
where they
maze
came
and all that,
from,
right?
yeah.
That's how they got here, which I think is really clever.
Also, you like the Doom Clock symbol right here?
Yes, that is on the end of every era book.
Well, this one I think it fits more than any of the others.
Yes. Next up, if you take a look,
is Requiem for Regina, which we will not cover. This is Elizabethan vampire.
We're not going to cover that tonight, but it is Elizabethan vampire, and it covers how to run vampire in the Renaissance, essentially, and in the early modern era. It's not quite as how would I put it, as elaborate as some of the other settings, but it's Elizabethan era. It's
fair
very
enough.
iconic.
It's similar to Vampire by Gaslight.
Yes, it's
Victorian
the sort of thing where you
London by Gaslight.
Like in this case, it's London by Torchlight.
So all I can think of is the vampires in the Dresden verse Red Court vamps.
Oh, definitely, you could do that. There's a lot of ways you can do this, and it also it's an interesting era, so that's why they wanted to include it.
Well, yeah. Also, vampires in Elizabethan is like peanut butter and chocolate. It just works.
They also include changeling, though not much.
So anyway, we're at the end. So my thoughts are, I've already said, I think it's the best book out of the lot.
This is your favorite so far. This is higher than Grugmage for you.
Well, the thing is, I think Three Kingdoms beats Grugmage slightly.
Really?
I had a lot of fun talking about Chinese history, remember?
Oh yeah, we did.
Also,
for about an hour and a half
Wuxia Changeling.
Yeah,
that
great
kind of
combo.
Because Grugmage is fun, but the werewolf half isn't as interesting, in my opinion.
Okay, yeah.
But Three Kingdoms has strong Sin Eaters, where it's a dour, dark. We have to put the armies of the dead down, for there are too many to count. Or most august personage of the great Jade Falcon, as he fucking crane kicks other disciple Marshal Wuxia fucking things. As you fight Lo Pan in fucking Shangri-La.
And also, there's a bit of teleportation stuff, so if you want a Roman soldier to suddenly appear, they're like, what the fuck? You can do that.
Roman foo. But,
yeah.
That's why it beats Grugmage, because Grugmage has a strong mage, but a weak werewolf. It's interesting, though, the conceptual.
But the contrast between the Sin Eaters and the Changelings kind of balances out.
In their higher point, because the werewolf one, it's interesting, but Return to Monkey, Return to Werewolf is not as interesting.
fair enough.
Grugmage is more creative. That's why I like it. I don't think it's as good as a setting as some of the others.
Okay.
This is my favorite, hands down, because it is both a culture that is completely unknown to me. It is alien as hell to a variety of people. And it is just insane. Like, this is Madcap. A muggerfish. A frickin' muggerfish that steals all your shit.
Flying fish that somehow steals your stuff without any hands. Like, then you got like the time traveling samurai. You've got
The
all these other
horrible
things
plant
that you can throw
spore
in.
fungus things. Time traveling samurai. The entire town of Mississauga, Ontario.
Ending up somehow in yeah, like there's so many little plot hooks you can play around with that.
And on top of that, the monsters and cults are interesting. You have the smoking mere jaguars who linger on because they know some of the first race of men are still out there, and they won't leave until the last are slain by them and any who protect them. You have the monkeys who literally hollow people out because they're angry that the gods have abandoned them and have refused to fix their injuries, their curse. You have the blue children who hang out in the waters of Lake Titicaca of the lake.
Not Lake Titicaca, Lake Texacoco.
Lake Texacoco.
Not Titicaca. I'm sorry, that's just
that's in
South America.
Yeah,
that's not in Central. I think
it is. It's where the Aymara are.
Yeah,
but you have that. You have all these interesting critters, and on top of that, notice that the big focus is right at the butt end, where it's actually really interesting, ranging from the guy who died of syphilis and staring at a block to Montezuma's insanity.
They cover the history pretty well.
They cover the history, but the main focus is right around the time of Montezuma's reign. So you could have pre and post Cortez. Perfectly fine.
Yeah,
it's like the Ottoman one, which is really good. Like, it covers it covers the entire thing, but without focusing too hard on one specific. Unlike Viking Werewolf, which sucked.
Which is just focused around like this one battle.
This one crappy battle in Ireland. Okay.
That no one remembers.
Oh no, Brian Boru died. Who cares?
Like we all it's like how many it's like, oh yeah, Brian Boru died. Do you know which battle?
No.
No.
It's some shithole in Ireland. It's not even Dublin. It's outside of Dublin.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Irish people cared slightly.
No.
Slightly.
I'm 1/4 Irish. I can say honestly, no.
I'm more Irish than you, and I don't care.
What do you think?
Exactly.
What'd you think of this, Greg? What'd you think of Aztec Insanity?
I thought, as someone who only has a passing reference with any of this stuff, and especially no passing with Skinchangers, werewolves, and other things, it was creative.
Out of the settings you've hung with us, I think it's been 2. I don't think it's your favorite. I think it might be 3 Kingdoms, but what would you rate it?
What's the rating system we're using again?
There's amazing, good. No, there's amazing, good. Then decent, playable,
decent. Yeah,
trash.
I'm putting this at decent more just because it's just so far removed from what I know. It's just hard for me to get a reference.
Yeah,
and I mean like from like World of Darkness stuff. I don't mean history. I just mean World of Darkness stuff. It's like so removed from all the things.
Oh, that's perfectly fair.
Yeah. I'd say this is good. I wouldn't call this amazing. Mostly because I think that it really does lean a lot on the weirdness and unfamiliarity of the setting compared to like when I compare this to After the Fall, I think that's a much better demon setting.
After the Fall does give more details, but I think it's just because it's not just purely demon. It actually uses a splat that you don't see too often anymore.
Yeah, that's true. But I think that the tighter focus of After the Fall makes it a better for both of them.
It is, honestly. Because plot-wise, it shows kind of how the cycle of demons work.
Yeah.
Where they try to work with the new, and usually what happens is either through their incompetence or just god machine chicanery, they just ultimately fail.
Yeah. I think it's the better setting, arguably. If I had to rate anything that's so far amazing, it's like Grugmage, 3 Kingdoms, and After the Fall are like my amazing settings. I think that they're fantastic.
Grog Mage, After the Fall, and this, and the reason I rate with this is it's more varied. After the Fall is interesting, and if you like, there's a great open game license game called Thieves World, which focuses on the main city of Sigil. Not Sigil. It might have been Sigil. I don't remember. I don't know the name, but the name of the city in Thieves World, it focuses on the city.
Yeah.
If you like city-built games like a Waterdeep game, that's a good example. Or Sigil from Pathfinder, not Pathfinder, Sigil from
Planescape.
Planescape. Thank you. If you like those types of city games where the intrigue is all in a city, kind of like Vampire the Masquerade does, it's perfect for that. But if you like slightly more varied, if you like to actually go out in the boonies sometimes, like, this is stronger, I think, for that. Because there are more varied things you can do here. Don't get me wrong, a demon game, since they're immortal, they last a lot longer, so you can see a lot of changes throughout that city. But in terms of just what you can work with, I think there's just more here. I like I said, the Ottoman one is like number two for me, because Grog Mage is fun, but I think conceptually fun. Player-wise, not so much.
Okay.
Because it's kind of hard to grasp your hand around, like, giant cow! Like, and that's like your big threat,
Literally they list out a giant cow as one of your primary, like, this thing's gonna fucking murder you. Like, which
it's interesting, but at the same time, it's just like.
Yeah, I mean, I like that because it's just a fun contrast to what you usually see in a game.
And that's why I like it. It's just, compared to, like, Wuxia China, Ottoman Empire, and this.
Yeah, I get you on that.
Those three are a lot more playable, I think.
And
replayable, I should say.
What's really good about this is that nothing that we've covered so far has been bad. Or even, like,
To the Strongest is weak, but that's mainly because they picked a good time period and they fucked up how they handled it.
Yeah, like, none of these have been any worse than, like, playable. Right?
I mean, I think I still rated To the Strongest as, like, decent.
Decent? Yeah, I think, like, that's a good point. Like, none of these have been worse than decent.
And it's really just, like, I think I even rated the Viking Age good, just even though it focused on one specific stupid battle.
It gave you enough to
like,
play
you can
around
just
with
ignore it. You can just do the Great Northern Invasion. That's no big deal.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel that this one kind of, I don't know, like,
it has a higher floor, but maybe your ceiling's lower.
Yeah, like, it's good, but I think it relies on you doing a lot of research on your own as a GM.
I don't think so. They give a lot of details on the. They give a lot of good details on the culture here, and
there's
do,
enough
but weirdness.
I do know that, but, like, when we're talking about more, like, the other stuff around this era, and they give you basically just Tenochtitlan, and that's kind of it. Like, the area around where the heartland of Mexica is.
Well, no, duh. That's where literally most of the population is.
I mean, fair enough, but, like, there's just a part of me that wishes that they'd focused a little more on, like, some of, like, maybe given a little more attention to the Mayans and some of the other cultures in the area.
Mayans are not remotely near the area, but the lacking of the Tarascans, and they've mentioned the Huastecs a few times. They probably should have.
Yeah, you get what
Tarascans,
I mean. Like,
Huastec, Zapotecs.
Yeah, like the more of the Mesoamerican cultures. Like, I
know why you're complaining, but at the same time, if you think about it, the Constantinople/Istanbul one's just a freaking city, man.
It is, but it's an important city. Like,
and Tenochtitlan isn't.
It is, but it isn't. I guess because its impact isn't as big as, like, Teotihuacan. Like, that one is huge. Like, the Sun Pyramid, all this influence of, like, gods and culture and all that.
And they mentioned Teotihuacan quite a bit.
They do, but okay. Like, but again, I just
they had to spend a lot more time explaining, because think about it. Out of the three of us, remember how even I didn't know jack shit about this that much?
Yeah.
They had to explain what their society and culture was like, their details.
Yeah, and even, I mean, I've read.
We only had 30 pages, man.
Yeah.
And they had to explain their gods too, their complex,
like,
theology.
If you'd given this another 10 pages, I think that this would have been.
but that would have been too big.
Yeah, that's the only problem. Like
This,
if you give this
I
another
honestly
10 pages,
think.
this would be
Imagine.
amazing.
No, I got it. Imagine if it's one of those. It's just not a Dark Eras book, but like it was its own splat.
Yeah,
Kind of like
I could see that.
fourth age. You know, the fourth.
Yeah.
The Force. What's the term for it again?
Mm.
The mummy thing where the Sirius is done.
The
done
softest turns.
Sothist turn. If they did it like the Sothic turns bit,
Yeah.
where it's like 100 pages, and this is. But Heart of Hearts, this was still supposed to be like we have to fit it in this only so much.
Yeah, like
It's weird. I'm
That's why-
using Vampire Second Edition logic, even though I hate Vampire Second Edition logic to defend
yeah,
this.
it's again. I just think it's not amazing. That's all. Like I think it's good. I just think it could have been better.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It can be. I will openly admit I am kind of more of a. I've always been more forgiving, I think, than average. Like, if you look at the autistic analysis videos, which we haven't done for a while because
you've forgiven a lot of those. Yeah.
because you notice the diopsid is a lot more strict than I am on those things.
Yeah.
I think it might just Heart of Hearts be. It's a unique, interesting setting. I don't really see it too often anymore.
Yeah.
It has all of the hallmarks of high fantasy, so it's very easily portable. Like you just have to replace the system.
And again, there's like standout like the spider canoe. Like the spider canoe is fantastic.
Well, don't forget Facility 995, where its sole purpose is to make monsters, and it's just guarded by sun giants.
Like there's a lot of little interesting bits in this.
The murder fish.
The thief fish is fantastic. Like it's just
there's the knife that makes you want to end all long. Well, that's the thing. This whole thing is high strangeness.
Yeah, and I love high strangeness. Like I will read I will listen to like hours long podcasts on like weird topics, but I don't. How do I put it? Like there's that little bit of high strangeness in there, but it's just not enough for it to elevate it, I guess. Like there's pieces of it, but I want more.
That's the thing. It only had 30 pages, and you're like, I wish it was 40 or 50 pages.
Yeah, but that's why I can't say it's amazing, because I know this sounds contradictory, but it's like, you know.
No, it's fair. It's fair. Honestly, I think I got two goods. I'm okay with being overruled because, again, I'm more forgiving on stuff like this, especially if it's new. The novel or the creative, usually it gives me a lot of leeway.
Definitely is novel for a lot of people.
I mean, so is Grugmage, but I'm kind of not souring, but like I'm dimming a bit because there's other examples that I'm looking at it now.
Yeah.
Because that's also very novel, but I'm also thinking like, given they focus so much on harvesting and making sure you don't instantly fucking starve to death.
Yeah.
That kind of limits it a bit.
Where you're very focused in Grudge Mage. I mean, you are here
also,
too.
There's a lot of the mechanics
demon
that are just stripped out too.
Yeah, but that's the thing here.
I will change my rating to good, and here's why.
Okay.
They don't. They show it's more about the setting than it is the monsters.
Fair enough. They barely throw mechanics in here. Yeah.
I'm okay with that because it's a settings book, but they don't really talk too much about the Skinchangers in detail, and they don't really bring up demons as much as they should. I'm thinking about it compared to Constantinople, where they go into big detail about that.
They go into big detail about what the demons think about everything that's going on and all their factions. And then
it is
like
really good. It might just be my favorite.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And Three Kingdoms is also stronger because, well, same thing. It goes into details primarily with the Sin Eaters because, honestly, the amount of death is a lot more important than Wuxia Kung Fu fighting happy time.
Yeah. I think so. We kind of all agreed that this is good. It's not amazing, but it's very close.
It's my favorite of the ones we've covered so far, but that may just be me being fickle.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
It is good. I really enjoyed it, and I don't know what we're doing next. Actually, I know exactly what we're doing. I'm gonna raise my blood pressure.
Oh no!
War of Reaving.
Oh no! We're not doing Wars of Reaving until we finish the Inner Sphere House books.
Oh, okay, then we'll just do House Capellan because it's the most disappointing of the bunch.
We already mentioned that. We can do that one. After this is also we could go back to Thirsty Sword Lesbians.
Do you really want to cover the worst
I can just
book?
imagine your.
No,
because
I
still have to finish that.
we don't have to, but
I mean, I admit we did jump out of Black Tokyo, but like, Black
The thing
Tokyo
is,
just
though-
a fetish book.
the thing is, though, Randall's looked at the next book partially. In his own
Yeah, it's-
words, he described it as the worst one. The worst scenario is next.
And it's after like a really good one, like the roses or whatever, the violets,
The dangerous violets.
dangerous violets, which like that's fun. That one's fun. If you stripped that out and made its own little mini book, we'd be happy. But
Anyway, since we now have the running time of a proper edit for a Dune movie, I think we'll call it off here. We'll end
see
it
you,
with
everyone.
Dino, Dino.